All right, good evening. Tonight is the meeting of the Milton Planning Board of August 13th. This is the third meeting of fiscal 2016, and we are being both taped and broadcast. My name is Emily Innes. I'm the chair. I'm going to ask the other members to introduce themselves.
Alex Whiteside, I'm a member.
Michael Kelly, member.
William Clark, Planning Director.
Julia Getman, clerk.
Tim Sawinski, Assistant Town Planner.
Brian Furs, member.
Great. And I'm going to quickly run through our agenda for tonight. So, do we have any minutes to approve?
We have minutes from the 4th, 5th, and 7th of May.
Okay,
Those
so
were a few weeks ago.
all right, so we'll go through those. Our next meeting dates are August 27th, September 10th, and September 24th. We also have a public workshop for zoning next Monday, August 17th. We'll do citizen speak. Under new business, we have an A&R for 224 Central Avenue, a discussion of 135 Gun Hill Street driveway opening, a discussion of the Shade Tree Committee, discussion of the site plan modification for 556 Adams Street. We have a public hearing on Thayer Nursery at 7:15. Under old business, we have deliberations for 865 Brush Hill Road, special permit, site plan approval, and scenic road. We have the process for and discussion of the zoning articles for the October 2015 town meeting. Under other business, we received a request, which I forgot to forward to Tim, to actually appoint the member to the Capital Committee. So we're going to talk about that. We've talked about it before. I have a suggestion. So when we have a break in our meeting, we'll do that. Bill, you look like you're going to say something. Was it related to that? Okay.
It was related to that, but you appointed me, and it cannot be me.
Right.
It must be a member of the planning board itself.
Okay, so we will get to that. Now we have,
Cheryl's not here, why don't we appoint her?
oh, there's an idea. That'll teach her to be late.
Being quick on your feet.
Oh, she just made it in. She has a chance to deny it. So we have about 13 minutes before our public hearing starts. Let's go on to the minutes for starters, and then we'll move on to citizen speak.
So I distributed, I think it was before last meeting, the minutes from May 4th, May 5th, and May 7th. Those were the three pre-town meeting, planning board meetings. So those have been, I don't know if anyone has anything to say about those.
Okay.
I have no idea where they went. I've undoubtedly seen them because you distributed them, but I've not read them. Has anyone read them other than Tim?
I skimmed through them, so
Well, I'd like to read them. But,
came by email?
let's
maybe,
put them on to the next meeting.
maybe you could send me an electronic copy.
I will do that.
All right. In that case, do we have anybody who wishes to speak? If you're wanting to speak on something that is on tonight's agenda, we ask you to hold those comments until we get to that, especially for the public hearing, so that your comments are part of that record. But if you want to speak on anything else, we'd be delighted to hear from you. Anybody wish to speak? All right. Seeing none. Bill, is anybody here for the A&R or for the other items? All right, let's start with you, sir. Please introduce yourself and speak
Good
into the
evening.
microphone.
My name is Robert Hannigan, representing 224 Central Ave LLC for Form A&R plan adjacent to 224 Central Ave. They're going to cut off the little lot in Residence B, 125 square feet. It has frontage on Central Ave and sufficient area. And
All right.
here we are.
Any questions? for
I
Mr.
have a
Hannigan?
question.
Alex, go ahead.
Now, the law says that to get an endorsement, every lot shown on the plan has to have adequate frontage. And it doesn't seem to me that Lot A2 has any frontage.
Yep, I was
So
wondering
what do you
about that
think
myself.
about
Those are existing lots.
that? So,
And the reason they're on there is because the adjoining lot lines for Lot A1 and A2, adjoining Lot 1A, are shown on a previous plan that are plus or minus distances. And that plan is referred to in the notes and they're on there to show that the lot line is now defined, and the balance of the dimensions on the lots comply with, are identical to the plan on record, the Fletcher plan in 1956. And the only difference is those two lot line, or the lot line, one lot line for lot A1 and 4 lot lines for lot A2.
Which lot line for lot A1?
So it's the one from Central Ave to the corner of lot A2.
It's the one from.
Now, if it pleases the board, those lots can be eliminated. And the only reason that they're shown is to demonstrate that they have the same area as the 1956 plan, and that the balance of the dimensions are the same. They can easily be
Well,
shown as abutters.
it probably would be, well, because putting them here.
They're not new lots, excuse me, they're not new
But
lots,
they're
and they're not being created.
But
They're
they're-
just,
Well, I thought you said you changed the line.
no, define the line.
You defined the line?
Define the line. The 1956 plan,
Is it different from the 56 plan?
Thank you.
so, I'm not familiar with that portion of the law, I'm not an attorney,
Pardon?
but they're not new lots, not creating lots, and as I said, if it's better for the board, I can redraw the plan and eliminate those lots and just show the line.
I think you should do that just because it seems to me that these lots, this plan was approved before you needed to have frontage on the street. You just had to have frontage.
Well, I explained why I showed them, so.
Okay.
And they're not new lots, they're
But they're
existing
lots.
lots. Sorry?
They're lots.
They're lots, yeah.
As shown on, no, but as shown on the 56 plan, it seems to me that we understand why they endorsed this, because you didn't, Lot A2 didn't need to have frontage on the street. It just needed to have frontage as then defined by the bylaw. And then in 58, it seems to me, they determined that you needed frontage on a street, so Lot A2 became non-conforming.
I understand that.
So, I mean, if we were to endorse this plan now with these lots shown on it, it wouldn't be the same as having them shown on a 1956 plan. It would be on a new plan, and people could say you endorsed it. All the lots have to have, so eliminate them, and that would be the way to go, don't you think?
I agree. I remembered the bit about the law requiring that all lots have frontage, so I was wondering what that would mean when they were on
All
this.
new lots would need frontage, yeah.
Yeah, so
Right.
the new lots would be, but all
Right, they
lots
do,
on the plan
right.
have to show. So I understood that.
I don't recall that.
There's no common ownership here, correct? Between 216
correct,
Central Avenue,
correct.
so Lot A2 and
The abutters
the
are
new
shown, yeah.
1A.
Right.
There's no common ownership
Right.
there. Okay, so just to clarify that. Any other questions from board members on this A&R? So if you can remove those lots.
Can we request the board vote to endorse the plan once those lots are removed?
Yeah, we can have, if the board members wish to do that, we can authorize Bill Clark to sign it.
That would be
and have
greatly
the-
appreciated.
Yep,
So-
absolutely.
So the land is currently owned by the owner is lots 1B and 1A, right?
It's currently
Combined
lot
lot.
1, and it's being divided into 1B and 1A.
Right,
Yeah.
but
Right.
the total land owned by this particular owner is, you might say who the
58,760.
owner is? Oh, there it is. No, no,
24
where
Central
is
Ave
the owner?
LLC.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
Okay, so
So do you want to make
I-
a motion, Alex?
I think that, subject to removal of the two lots shown on the 1956 plan,
Lots A1 and A2.
yeah, that we authorize Mr. Clark to endorse this plan as not requiring subdivision approval.
Do you have a second? Yep. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, there you go.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. All right, we have 5 minutes before our public hearing. Do we have enough time to discuss Gun Hill Road? Or do you want to hold off on that?
Bill would know more about that project
Okay.
than I would. I can tell you about the Shade Tree Committee.
Why don't you tell us about the Shade Tree Committee?
So the Shade Tree
Good
Committee is an issue that some concerned citizens have been talking about. There was a proposal for a warrant article, perhaps either put forward by the planning board or the Board of Selectmen or both. I've spoken with Anne Marie Fagan, the town administrator, and she has told me that at the Board of Selectmen's next meeting on Tuesday, they'll be taking up this issue and potentially nominating a committee to look into an article or basically just to be a committee. This is something that actually is in the master plan. You know, a committee to sort of look into how money allocated for shade trees is spent, where it's spent, where the trees go, things like that. So it's a good idea. Maybe not quite ready to roll yet, but the selectmen will be talking about it on Tuesday.
Okay, so there's no warrant article at this
Yeah,
point
there's
for us
nothing to support
say-
or not support.
Okay.
So
All right. Let's see, what else can we do? Site plan modification will take a little while. Everything else will take a little while. Tim, why don't you give us an update on what you've been doing over the past few weeks? And what Julia perhaps has been contributing also to the office.
Julia has been doing yeoman's work, organizing a lot of our files in the planning office. So at the very least, it looks better for people coming in and visiting
Okay.
to do the people's work. It also functions better. So good job by her. We all appreciate it. And she's fitting in very nicely with the department. We've been doing a lot of work on the zoning outreach. Our zoning survey just closed this week. I actually have, we can talk about this later, but I have the results. I have a couple hard copies. Those results got posted online this afternoon, so people can check that out at the planning board website. We're also working with the IT department to clean up the planning board and planning department websites. So hopefully they'll be a little bit better organized, a little more functional. A lot of the really interesting stuff that people would want to look at used to be kind of buried deep in the bowels of the website, and it's now front and center, so people can check that out.
With cryptic links.
Cryptic is a word. I would say, I don't know. I'd be interested to hear what cryptic means.
Well, it simply means that someone going to it and trying to get anywhere is, it's sort of like being in a maze.
Since it's
So-
been improved or prior to it
No,
being
this
approved?
is why
I-
this work is, we're
I would encourage you
absolutely thrilled.
to check it out. So it used to be there was a planning documents link.
Yes.
Who knows what that means, cryptic, as it were, that had all this sort of stuff. So we've taken all the forms, there's a link to forms on the front page,
Right.
there's a link to plans and studies, there's a link to current projects. So hopefully that's something that people find to be intuitive. I would encourage anyone that uses the planning board website out there in TV land, if they have any problems or comments or issues, to send them to me. We're always looking to make that a more pleasant user experience. So.
Excellent. And it's been getting a lot of use this summer because we've had the surveys and the public comment for the zoning tonight, so.
We're rocking and rolling on the website.
Perfect. Excellent. Thank you for the update. Perfect timing, as it's 7:15. So we are going to open the continued public hearing for the special permit and site plan approval for Thayer Nursery. The process for tonight will remain the same. We're going to get a report from Bill Clark on the outstanding items and new information received. Then we'll get an update from the applicant on the outstanding items and where they are. We'll take initial questions from board members and then testimony from members of the public, and I will announce the usual reminders when we get to that point. And then we will identify any outstanding items that need to be addressed before our next meeting. So, Bill, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Right, I handed you a narrative and a series of pictures that deal with the fence, the type of fence, the height of the fence, and I'm sure the old bills will go through it with you. Talks about having the fence go all the way around the Quarry, Tevens, Rowan, Johanning, and Cole property. It is the same size fence going all the way around. It's at different heights because the ground undulates and goes up and down. The narrative says that the fence could be placed on posts that are 25 foot on center, but their plan is to do it 8 foot on center, 8 foot posts, an 8 foot fence, and it's a sound attenuating material placed on top of it. The pictures show what the fence would look like, how the fence works. That's that part of it, and then drainage. On the drainage, I've been out to the site a couple of times now to review what what DeSalle Burke is planning to put on the ground, and they've changed the plan a few different times. The plan changed again over the weekend, and because of it, they're missing one connection that goes back to the town's system. We thought we had it fully contained within the property, but it was a absolutely huge system that just couldn't be developed on that one site. That new plan, I guess, was done this afternoon, but they're still having some tweaking issues with the going into the town system. I haven't talked to our engineering department about what the new plan says because I haven't seen it yet. I know what came in, but it didn't come out until 4 o'clock. So it's the only part that we have left that's really an issue. That's it. The fence. Having taken a walk the whole property for the fence, I would suggest that the board take a look at a potential site walk time to look where that fence would go. Because of the undulating land, listening to the conversation that went on, the different discussion points of, well, it's this high here, it's located here. If you decide you want to go for a site walk, just before you go, we'll make the requirement that they take and put an orange line where the fence will go, so you'll see where it is, you'll see how high it is. I think it's a wise use of your time and understanding what the plan says.
Excellent, thank you. Ned Corcoran, is he here? There you are, Ned. Sorry, I didn't see you back there. If you want to come forward and give us an update for the applicant. Good evening.
Good evening, thank you. I'm going to ask Josh and Maggie to explain what they're proposing with respect to the fence. I do know that the DeSalle and Burke have put together a modified drainage design that is being finalized, and the plan is to share it with the Rowan Johanning's engineer for their review, and also with the town for town review, so that hopefully there's some consensus around the ability of the plan to do what it needs to do. So that's, I know that they were working to try and get something out this week. Looks like earliest will be first of the week.
I had something in at that point. I know that the drainage plan had the issues with it had to do with soils. The depths of soils, types of soils, and DeSalle Burke went out last week to do that. When we knew that they were coming, I notified Mr. Giuliano, who is the Johanning Row engineer, of what they were going to do, when they were going to do it. So he was notified of it to go and do that. Mr. Burke did take and create soil logs for what he saw, so he has a soil profile of the hole that he dug. I think Josh can go in and give you a better description of maybe some of the soils that were in that hole, but I know that they're in the drainage report.
Great, thank you. So if you want to discuss the fence now and present the proposal that Bill handed out, that'd be useful.
Sure. Josh Oldfield, 24 Forest Street, Milton. Been a lot of discussion regarding the fence, and I think we're working towards a solution that would work for everyone. Not only us, the abutters, but the neighborhood as a whole. In this memo dated April 27, 2015, from Pam Lepore, Chris and Tina Tevens, Phil Johanning, and John Rowe, they addressed their goals for the fence. And in their wishes, they specified they would like to see a continuous 8-foot black chain link fence with Acoustablock sound barrier. That's in a memo to Alex Whiteside on April 27, 2015. So we've taken that into consideration as what we think is a win for everyone. So what we're proposing is, based on what their recommendation was, a better solution than that. What we're proposing is an 8-foot fence that's high tensile, which means it's stronger, less maintenance, and there was a third component that I liked about it that led me in this direction, but I can't recall. But knowing what the board's goals and expectations were, those were the two that stood out, and the resiliency of the fence. So, again, that drove the bus. Then we understood, based on that, that the sound attenuation component was extremely important. I was on the phone today with the manufacturer of the sound attenuation product that Tina Tevens recommended. And there are two options that come to, that the sound attenuation is available in. It comes in, oh, actually, let's get back to the fence first. So the fence would be situated on 5-inch round posts as depicted in the photos. The posts would be 12 feet long, and 4 feet would be in the ground, and each post would be cemented. So the longevity and durability of the fence would be enhanced. And because of the weight of the sound attenuation, that's why we shortened up the span from 25 feet to 8 feet. So knowing that the sound attenuation was a huge goal for everyone in this process, I had a discussion with that company today, the one that the Tevenses said we should contact. Their panels, they have two options. One size is 6 feet tall by 30 feet wide. The other size is 8 feet tall by 6 feet wide. Their recommendation to me was go with the 6 feet by 30 feet because you're going to have less seams in the run, meaning increased sound abatement and less maintenance. So there would be a reduction percentage-wise. I didn't figure it out. Obviously, you go from 6 feet to 30, it gets reduced by a fifth or whatever. So that's why we went with that. And the reason why we're proposing the 8-foot fence is to tie in with what we have pre-existing on the site. So that's how we arrived at. What's that? They recommended to me that that the panels should be set at the ground level. I asked him specifically what you would, because my inclination was maybe it should be higher because that's where your eye gets drawn to and there's vegetation down low. But the gentleman I spoke to said to me, you're better off with the sound attenuation being at the ground. And my response was, what if the source of the noise is 100 yards away? And he said, definitely to the ground. So if there are any other questions, and the length of the fence would run the property line starting 25 feet in from Forest Street, and the reason why we can't go to Forest Street is because there is a rock outcropping there. So it starts where we can, as close to the road as we can, runs down 15 feet in, down the setback to the Tevens residence, across Tevens, and reverts back 10 feet or so, and then so we can gain the height of a wall that we've constructed for the Johanningen Road property, which would be another 2 feet above your existing grade. So we're taking into consideration and doing things to maximize the height, knowing the limitations with the sound attenuation barrier.
That's all on the fence from the presentation. I want to make sure that you've said, that you've given us all the information before I open up to questions.
Correct.
Great.
I think that's it.
Hang on, I had Brian first. Brian, then Cheryl.
Couple quick questions, Josh. One is, is the 8 feet tall by 6 foot wide panel not work, or would it be less effective? Did you have a conversation about that?
Less effective.
Okay. And if there was a strong preference by the abutters, is it something that you're willing to do, the 8-foot fence?
Correct.
Okay.
But I think it's the board's intent
I
to
understand.
have less maintenance, but yes, that's something we would consider.
Okay, thank you.
And just for a visual, if, that's why we have plantings. So if we're trying to accomplish two goals, decrease noise and decrease visual, we think that the panel closer to the bottom, to the ground level, with then the plants above it.
That's a 30-foot.
Will satisfy both of those.
Here's a depiction of a 30-foot section right there, if you guys want to pass these around. So it's a 6-foot tall gentleman in a 30-foot section.
Cheryl, you have a question?
Yeah, just the name of the manufacturer of the product again?
Was Acousta Block.
And the actual composition of the material is?
I think it's noted in a memo, was it? We could follow up with,
It's in the original package.
Is it, okay.
Yeah.
The original material that had been proposed to be installed on a fence.
We have a sample of it, if you're dying to
That's right. I
hold it in
remember.
your hand, I can go grab that.
Its primary intent is for acoustics.
correct, that's what it's made for. And we, because of the weight of this fence, that's why it's only made 8 feet tall, because of the weight of the fabric. So what we're proposing, even above the closing of the posts, we're proposing to install a top rail on the top, actually drilling an 1 5/8 hole through each post and putting in a scheduled 40 pipe, an 1 5/8 that's galvanized, running, and then we would use chain link metal ties to fasten the top of the fence to the post running across the top.
Any other questions on fence?
We have another from Cheryl, but I have
Cheryl, go
one.
ahead. And then Alex.
Is this, when you spoke to a Centec and they did their report, did you speak to them about the use of this particular material?
We did, yeah,
Okay, and that's reflected in their recommendations?
yes.
Okay, great, thanks.
Alex?
My memory is, and of course, my memory could be wrong, but that we were discussing a 10-foot fence, a 10-foot chain link fence with sound attenuating material. And if I'm wrong, but that is my recollection. And I note in your picture that they are installing this material on a chain link fence. And as we discussed, setting a post in concrete keeps it from bending, but it also, water tends to accumulate as it shrinks, and it rots faster. Is there any particular reason why you determined to use wooden rather than steel posts?
We chose that because of the aesthetics of the neighborhood. Well, yeah, these were 5-inch posts versus your typical metal post. I don't know the diameters that are typically used, so, and they're 12 feet long. So.
Cheryl, you had another question?
Did you say that this is similar to what you have already on your property?
It would be similar but modified to accommodate the weight of the acoustic fence.
But the wood material and the concrete footing for it?
We did not use concrete on our existing fence.
Because you don't have the same weight.
Correct.
But the wood's been there for how long? In the
Been
ground?
there about 10 years now. And there's no signs of decay or rot or anything like that. The galvanized product has a 30 to 40 year lifespan on the actual fence itself. So that's longer or in line with any other product. And I was told a pressure treated fence on because it's a 5-inch round would last 30 years.
Did you discuss the installation of the acoustic product on the high tensile fence with the manufacturer of the acoustic product? Have they done that before? Because we've seen the images that they show they use it on the chain link, but have they also had it installed on a high tensile before?
When I communicated with Acoustic Fence today, I said to the gentleman, I'm proposing to put this on this fence.
Okay.
And he called it up online, and his quote was, "That's real heavy-duty stuff."
Okay. All right. So he didn't express any concerns about the installation. All right, great.
The complete opposite.
Okay. Now, on the location, so you're starting 4 streets here, so you're starting 25 feet in, running down to the end, 15 feet away from the lot line, and then when you turn the corner, you said you're coming back another 10 feet, so
No,
you're 25 feet
how
from
much
lot line?
was the
I got
Stevens?
confused at the dimensions,
So
sorry.
then
the setback
the
at
setback on the Stevens property is the same 15 feet,
Same 15
which
feet.
the Stevens requested.
Okay, and then,
And then we'll do a run back in,
A return.
another 15 feet. And in that return will be a gate,
okay,
so we can access the drainage
And maintain the
and
swell.
maintain the swell. And then it will run 30 feet setback from the Johanning Row property.
okay, so
On
it's...
top of a 2-foot wall at that point.
Okay, so 2-foot wall and then the 8-foot fence there.
Correct.
So it's 10 feet at that point.
Yes.
So it's back 30 feet and up 2 feet and to make the 10 feet. Okay, and then it runs to the edge of the Johanning property or to the edge of your property?
What it would do is, we have an
on
existing
hillside.
fence there,
Yep.
so we would return it back towards the property line where it's located behind the Johanning property for about
Okay.
20 feet.
Okay.
So we would carry it again, fasten it to the existing fence,
Okay.
and make the modifications on that fence for X number of feet to get to their property line.
Okay, all right.
And there is also a fence on the Lepore property line, there's an existing willow, and so it's to the left of the existing willow.
Okay.
So still a fence, a gate with the acoustic fence on it, so we can access our property on the other side of the fence.
The main
Right,
gate.
yeah.
So the
you-
gate still would be, would still have the acoustic block on the actual gates themselves, so when they
Okay.
were not being opened, the barrier would be in effect.
Any other questions on the fence?
You keep saying a 2-foot wall. Does that exist right now?
Yes,
And is that new?
we did it last fall,
And what is the material that makes up the wall?
field stone.
It's by the swale.
Any questions on the status of the drainage from board members before we move it for the, the public to speak? Or any concerns that you might have? Yeah.
Bill, you mentioned that the drawing, the revised plan was going to go to the town engineer, but was he a part of the discussion of arriving at the design solution that's encompassed on that plan now? Or will he be seeing it for the first time?
He'll be seeing this plan for the first time because of the connection back out. Last week, we thought we had it all contained on site.
Okay,
There was an original idea was to take and send it out to the town's pipe. When they came back and said, after doing the soil testing, they thought maybe they could keep it on site. So they pulled everything back in, looked at it, they started digging again, they started, drawing it out, and he came back and he said, it's just way too big.
so will we get his opinion not only on the tie-in to the town, but also on the on-site system?
Yes.
So then we'll have 3 different engineers' opinions about the appropriateness of the design at that point?
Yes.
Great.
And hopefully we'll have consensus, so that's
Is
how
there
it
any
works.
on-site system left? I know we don't see it in person. It sounded like I know they originally had like a dry well to catch the stuff that was coming down the Lepore property, and then...
Good question. They actually have 2 dry wells on site now. The one that's closest to Hillside just isn't deep enough. It doesn't go down. It does what it's supposed to do, but it's not big enough. The soils there are too tight. There just isn't big enough. Chances are they're going to have to rip that up. They have to go down deeper. The connection that goes from that coming back to that swale that we were talking about the last several times, they haven't touched the swale since they dug it last fall. And I guess it's tied up in a court case. When you go and you look at it, it needs to have the soils that are in there taken out. There's also a dry well in there that has been accumulating silt that just run off from the property. It's just one of those things that it's the typical one that you see it, you know that it has to be cleaned out, but they can't go near it because of one of the lawsuits.
There's an injunction against cleaning
I don't know what it
their
is.
dry well?
Yep.
So that's outside the scope of this
It's
discussion.
outside of what I
Let's-
have to deal with, but I'm looking at it and I know that this is an easy one to clean up. For the neighbors to make the complaint that the water's running off, well, I don't see that it's running off, but I sure do know that if that thing was deeper, that goes back to Mr. Kelly's comment last week, if we had the swale and we could make it a foot or 2 deeper, would it hold more water? Absolutely. But right now, because they dug the hole and they didn't treat the sides, the thing did fill in some. So it's holding water, but it's not going anywhere. When you go after a rainstorm, it's got water in it. The water needs to shed in a certain direction. The lineup isn't with the existing dry well. The existing dry well needs to be cleaned out, but they can't get into it to clean it out. And that's the one that's in the middle, not the one down by Hillside Street. So if they can get in and clean that out, there is the potential to take and make that berm that is on the Johanning Row side. You could take and put a ponding material on there and put it on the berm so that the water cannot go through sideways. It forces the water to go down the swale itself. These are all things that will be in the plan when it comes out of the final one.
If
If
I
I
may,
That swale needs to get,
as I understand, the plan that's under consideration is to do that berm improvement along the Johanning Johanning property line.
Yeah.
Clean out that swale and extend swale down towards Hillside Street.
Okay.
And then into a wider containment area that will be constructed up against Hillside Street. My understanding is that that system would retain most storm events. There is some need to retain the higher level storm events or tie into the town system, and that's the piece that's still under review. Once that's all been done, calculations are done, the plan is to get it to Bill for the town to review, get it to Mr. Giuliano for his review, and so everybody's looking off the same complete set of material, and then respond to comments as appropriate and put the final design in place that seems to work for everybody.
So Bill had suggested that we do a site walk to see the location of the fence. I'd be interested to know, before we move to the public comment, if you all are interested in doing that, and if it also makes sense to hold the site walk after the drainage has been reviewed, so we can see them both at the same time. What are your thoughts on that?
After both are in
After
place,
both
that
are
would
done?
be,
And you'd be interested
obviously,
in
that would be,
Yeah, okay. Any other thoughts? Yeah, okay. So then I think that if you guys would host us for a site walk once those two things are done, that might make it easier for us to visualize. Brian, you've got a
Can I go
question?
back to the fence for just 1 minute?
Yeah, absolutely.
Or at the end of this, if you would like.
No, go ahead right now. That's fine.
Could you just tell the board at this point what the top of the fence will be? Height? Is it varying, or is there? Okay.
Pitch of the whole pitch of the ground,
So you're not, when you say the heights are different, it's not because you're trying to maintain a consistent height, it's because the fence is undulating along.
No, it's because
It's 2 feet.
if you were at
big at the most.
if you were at 8 feet
Yeah,
at Stevens and you maintained a consistent top of fence, you'd be at 4 feet.
So that's my question, is from
It'll be
the,
8 feet from the ground, and it will step.
so in some areas it'll be 8 feet from the
Always
ground
be-
at all
No, we
points,
can't-
or
we
at some
can't
points
step
will it
that
be
fence
12
though.
feet? That's my question.
No, at all points, it'll be 8 feet off the ground.
Thank you, okay.
It's just the height of the ground.
Great, thank you, I wasn't sure
it's an elevation.
Follow
if
the
it's
ground.
gonna follow the ground.
Yes.
Perfect.
It's not a height difference
That's
as
what I
much
wanted
as
to
it is
know.
elevation difference.
right,
It's always 8 feet off the ground. The
Correct.
elevation is different because the base elevation of the ground is different.
correct.
8-foot fence, 6-foot proposed material.
So no matter where you stand beside the fence, it's 8 feet, excuse me.
Correct. Except behind the Rojo Henning house where we're jumping up on top of the
Or
wall.
if I'm standing in the swale or something, or there's a wall there, obviously it's gonna be a little higher as well.
Correct.
And you had mentioned plantings next to the fence. Are the plantings on one side of the fence? Are they between the fence and the lot line? Or are they on both sides of the fence? Or does it depend on where within the property?
Correct. It
Okay.
depends on which property line you're speaking of.
Okay.
It's on both sides of the fence on Pam's property.
Right, yeah.
But on the Tevens property, because there's already an existing natural buffer, if we were to go in and do a planting, we would have to be removing some of the existing 50-foot trees to accommodate the
Okay.
plantings on that side.
Okay, so that'll be helpful to know when you do the final plan to just make sure that those are indicated. All right, any other questions from board members at this point? All right, in that case, if you all will sit back, I'll call it forward for the public hearing. I'll pull out my notes. So, as per usual for the public hearing, we're now going to take public testimony. Please wait to be recognized before speaking. Come to the table and give your name and address and speak into the microphone. When you're done, please leave the table. All questions or comments must be directed to the chair. Speakers may not cross-examine applicant, board members, or other speakers. The applicant will be asked to respond to questions at the end of the public input session. Who would like to come first? And I would say certainly, I believe from the board's point of view, the fence that was just proposed will affect the abutters, immediate abutters, obviously. So at some point, we would like to hear from the people whose property they will affect to get their sense. So who'd like to come up first? No one? All right, come on. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Phil Johanning, 23 Parkwood Drive in Milton. I, like Alex, remember a 10-foot fence. And I think that's preferable for us. The more protection we can get, I think the better everybody is, because it eliminates the need for future conflict. Additionally, I don't see the point of a fence unless the sound attenuation goes to the top. A chain link fence basically is nothing. It's like air. And so to have a 6-foot sound attenuation seems to me is the same as having a 6-foot fence. And there's no point to have a 10-foot fence and 6 feet of sound attenuation, in my mind. I'm not a sound expert, but that makes sense to me. So they didn't mention that 10 feet of sound attenuation material was available, but they did mention that it was 8. And I think protecting the neighbors from the noise is far more important than worrying about the maintenance of the sound attenuation material. It's just, this whole thing, the whole hearing is about protection of the neighbors as the intensity of the operation increases in the future. And so we can't look at the existing situation, we have to look at the future situation. More noise equals more protection for the neighbors, I think. The main point that I wanted to make, or the main thing that I wanted to address, was my my letter from the former meeting, and I had gone through the bylaw amendment that was passed by town meeting, and I tried to pick out things that I felt that we had not discussed yet, and I wanted to ask you, Emily, specifically, when we would have the opportunity to talk about these things. And the first one, and the one that's most important to me, is the enforceable 2012 baseline. Because in the 1967 special permit, it says that the amount of activity on the site will not go beyond the 1967 level. Yet the 1967 levels were never defined. And so there was nothing that abutters would have to say, well, this is more than 67. And so it's really important to control the future size of the business, to define that 2012 baseline. So do we have a 2012 baseline established?
I'm waiting to hear all of your questions so I can answer all that pertain to the board at once.
The other thing that we have not discussed is the duration of the initial special permit. I think you're probably aware that the town has just gone to court to enforce the cease and desist order. They went to court in July, which indicates that there's some concern, there's some legitimate concern about, let's say, enforcement and compliance. And so I would like to know what would be the duration of the initial special permit, so that we would know as abutters, what kind of let's say, reevaluation. When would we reevaluate, let's say, compliance and extend the permit or deny a future permit? The other thing that we've talked about is hours of operation. And the thing I think is relevant is not what Eagle Farms is doing or A. Thomas is doing, and I don't think it's relevant what they do at the Fruit Center. What I think is relevant is the existing special permit, and the existing special permit gives hours of operation. Now, compliance has not been great, but it does give. So if we're going to have the same or better protection as we have today, it seems to me that the baseline, the legitimate baseline, is what is in the existing special permit. The other thing that the bylaw amendment talks about is enforceable specifics related to noise, light, and odor. To be honest, I don't know how you do that, but I believe it's a requirement of the bylaw amendment. So it's required to come up with enforceable specifics, and I wonder what those are. I also felt that insufficient attention was given to other layouts. Pam and I presented one. Alex said he had given a lot of thought to the one that had been proposed by the applicant, and he had decided that was the best one. But I honestly don't understand why he said that. Like, I don't know what were the criteria that he looked at to determine that that was the best physical layout. So it seemed to me that some kind of discussion would have to occur at that point, but there was no discussion to speak of. Then the bylaw amendment says there has to be a mitigation plan which identifies each source of noise, dust, odor, and identifies effective measures to reduce and control each source. So it envisions an incredibly detailed, an incredibly detailed plan. And I don't think we've gotten to that level. One of the things, I don't know if you've seen it, is Pam submitted a video. And what you see is that mulch is being poured into a dump truck, and there's a tremendous amount of dust. And I kept wondering, what would mitigate that? Like, we never talked about, the movement of material into, let's say, delivery trucks or whatever. And so I was thinking that source of dust has never been addressed. We've never talked about mitigation. And so it seems to me that we would need to do that at some point. Another thing in the bylaw amendment was that there has to be a lighting plan using lighting fixtures appropriate to a residential neighborhood. So we've looked at some of these huge lights that John and I have an issue with, and we haven't discussed whether that type of lighting fixture is appropriate to a residential neighborhood. I would say no. Idling rules for equipment is another. Storage of fertilizers, herbicides, and pesticides. We've seen a lot of examples of, let's say, sound attenuation material, fencing, but I don't know what kind of containers would be used for this type of storage. What do they look like? How sturdy are they? What about water penetration? I'm not sure what is being done to keep those fertilizers, herbicides, and pesticides from leaching into the surrounding soils. And another thing we've talked about is, when would upgrades be done? And it seems to me that the bylaw amendment envisions that all the upgrades are done, and then the special permit is given. And that's what we understood was intended. And I'd like to know, is that what's going to happen? There's been some talk about a phase-in. We kind of think that if we're going to phase in the improvements, then we have to phase in the rights under the special permit. I mean, you can't have one without the other, in our opinion. All of those upgrades, let's say, or changes, are meant to protect us. So if you start the operation without all of the protections, then we're unprotected, and for what period of time? Finally, I've mentioned before that Mass General laws and Milton zoning bylaws say that the applicant is required to demonstrate that these uses are consistent with the general purpose and intent of the Milton zoning bylaws. And I don't think that has been covered in the application. Those are my questions.
Okay. And those are all of the questions directed at both us and the applicant, correct?
At this moment, yes.
Okay. All right. Well, then if you'll step back, I will start to answer some of them, and then we'll call up the next person. So many of them can be answered in reference to the special permit process, and the more particularly the process of a public hearing. So just to run through the major questions, the definition of the 2012 baseline and how that's done, the duration of the initial special permit, hours of operation, how the specifics will be enforced, especially with relation to noise, light, and odor, the question of the discussion of other layouts, the mitigation plan, and the specificity of detail, and among that, sources of dust such as material delivery, the lighting plan, the storage of materials and how particularly that will be done, the timeline for upgrades and whether or not the upgrades should or can be done prior to the special permit or prior to operations, and then the applicant demonstrating that the uses are consistent with the zoning bylaws of the town of Milton. So what happens during a application and then the public hearing process is an applicant makes an application to the planning board that is determined to be complete in that it addresses, at least in some detail, all of the questions that, or all of the requirements of the zoning. The purpose of the public hearing is twofold. One is to make sure that the planning board understands the application that has been presented and is able to question the information and make sure that if there is some information that is maybe not fully complete, that we are able to ask those questions and get that information. The second part, of course, is to give the public the right to do the same thing, to come before us and say, hey, we've reviewed the application. There are impacts to us as abutters or simply as residents of Milton, and we're concerned and we want those answers. So that's where this process of asking for information, receiving the updates, allowing the board to ask questions on the updates so you can all hear what our questions are, and then giving you the opportunity to come forward and also ask questions and define to the board what the impacts are to you as you see them of this, whether pro or con. So that's where we are in this. Now, some of the questions that you have asked, when will the board discuss this? The board begins its deliberations after the public hearing process is closed. So what we do is we gather the evidence from the applicants, both what was initially put in the application and what we've since requested. We gather the evidence from you, the members of the public, what you've requested, what your concerns are. Once we feel that we have received all of that information, we then close the public hearing, which means we close that comment period. It doesn't mean that we can't ask further questions. If in our deliberations it becomes absolutely clear that there's a difference of opinion on a fact, we can certainly ask for those facts to be clarified, whether it's something from the applicant or whether it's something from the public. But at the point the public hearing period stops, the board is really talking among themselves to say, this is the information we received, this is what I understood, these are my concerns. How are we going to create this document and create the standards by which the special permit may be issued, and how those standards will affect the business going forward and affect the abutters going forward. So in some cases, certainly the duration of the initial special permit is something that the board decides in its deliberation period. And there are a number of things that go into that. For most special permit zoning, once a special permit is granted, it's granted. For this particular zoning bylaw, the board reserved in the zoning the right to grant it for a lesser period of time than permanently. And so that's something what we'll consider. And one of the issues that goes into that also goes to another question here, which is the timeline for upgrades. So the planning board cannot require that the upgrades be done prior to the issuance of the special permit. We don't have the authority to do that because our authority comes with the issuance of the special permit, which then grants the building inspector the right to enforce it. However, it is my understanding that the business can't start until the certificate of occupancy is granted by the building inspector, which would be done once the upgrades are complete. So as far as deciding how long the initial special permit should go for, one of the questions is how long will it take for those upgrades to be completed, because you don't want to have the special permit go just in time for the upgrades to be completed. And the other thing, of course, is the calendar year. We are moving, unfortunately, towards winter, and so we have to take into account the timing of the construction and the planting. Fortunately, fall is a good time to plant things. So it will depend on when, and well, first of all, if the special permit is granted by the planning board, then if so, when the special permit is granted, how long we think is a reasonable amount of time for the upgrades, for the mitigation to go into place, and the seasonality of the weather. Many of the other things that you had questions on, things like the level of enforceability, is something that has been a concern of the board. We have asked information. Tim and I have been going back and forth with pulling out from the application and from the supplemental materials and the discussions we've had of what elements would relate to the mitigation and how those would work. And we are waiting to hear more about the fence, which we heard tonight, and about the drainage, which is coming forward, before we finalize that for the board's discussion during the deliberation phase. And that will take into account all of the information that we've been receiving, and it's been a lot. So that's where we are with the process and how that works. So unfortunately, we simply can't answer some of the questions because some of it comes out of our deliberations, and one board member may want one level of specificity and other board members may want other levels, and that's part of our deliberative process. So,
Could I ask one quick follow-on question?
yes, of course.
Okay. Then, in the application, what is the 2012 baseline?
So the applicant has provided numbers that they say are the 2012 baseline. Members of the public can question those numbers. Members of the board can question those numbers. But they have provided a set of numbers within the application that they have defined as the 2012 baseline.
Numbers for what?
Well, if you look through the application, they've got quantities of materials that are on site or being sold. They have employees. I think they have the truck list of which trucks were there in 2012. And all of those would be in a draft special permit or in actually the draft order of conditions. We're not even looking at a draft special permit at this point. Those would be listed as conditions.
So just one more quick follow-on.
Of course.
How would we monitor deliveries? How would the building inspector monitor deliveries? How would we monitor quantities? How would that be possible? I had suggested that it has to be financial, based on the tax return of the applicant.
Yep.
And that is measurable, it's consistent, it complies with certain rules that the government institutes. I don't want to see their tax return, and I don't think you want to see it. Mm-hmm. But I do believe that the applicant would have to pay for a certified public accountant, maybe G.T. Riley in Milton, to review the information on an annual basis and make sure that the 2012 baseline, whatever their 2012 tax return said, is equal to or greater than future levels of activity. Mm-hmm. I think that would be measurable, consistent, and fair to everyone, because it doesn't put any additional onus on anybody. Deliveries, in my mind, doesn't cut it, because it's just impossible for neighbors, the building inspector, or anyone to monitor.
The question of monitoring is a good one, and I remember that you had mentioned tax returns. There are the quantities of materials, another proposal that's been put forward by the applicant. There may be other ways. That again comes through in the board's deliberations. So,
Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to ask questions? Yes, of course.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Pamela Poire, 44 Forest Street. I'm the largest abutter to Thayer Nursery. And I just wanted to bring up another issue that I am surprised we haven't discussed. But along with the noise, odors, and truck traffic, there's a very important issue that has not been addressed, and that is public health. Since most consumers purchase treated mulch because untreated mulch attracts termites, my concerns are not only what chemicals are used to treat the mulch, but what is in the recycled wood that is used to make the mulch. Dyed mulch, whether it be black, red, or green, is made from recycled wood. This trash wood comes from old wood pallets, old decks, fence posts, wood from demolished buildings containing paint and varnish, and sometimes pressure-treated wood, which contains chromium, copper, and arsenic, known carcinogens. A study conducted by Johns Hopkins School of Public Health confirms that amounts of air pollution particles less than 1/5 the width of human hair can be extremely harmful, even deadly. And I hope you had the opportunity to watch the video that I submitted to Tim about a month ago.
Of the firewood? Yes, absolutely.
No, it was the loading of the mulch and the dust
Yes.
flying around. That was just one load of mulch. And if you multiply that by many loads a day times 365 days a year, No fence high enough will stop these pollutants or fumes that Thayer is proposing along my property. I have the right to walk my property and enjoy my property without the fear of inhaling chemicals and endangering my health or my family's health. Our streets have become a major cut-through, especially during rush hour. Friends have told me that many navigation websites actually send them up Forest Street to avoid Route 28, and now neighbors want more truck traffic by supporting Thayer. It just doesn't make sense. I have trucks rumbling in the front of my house, bobcats roaring along the side and back of my house, and now they're proposing toxic activity along my property line as well. My health, my family's health, and public health needs to take precedence. I asked the board to require at least a 30-foot setback of fence along my property, the same as the road Joe Henning setback, and locate the mulch and stone piles as far away from abutters, not just me, as possible. And I agree with Phil Joe Henning about the 8-foot sound attenuation rather than the 6-foot.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you very much. Does anybody else want to speak? Yes?
Do we have information about the characteristics of the mulch that's on the property? Do you know whether that has the materials that Mrs. Lepore referenced in it?
I think we should ask that when the applicant comes
Okay.
back. So I don't think we have that information.
Okay.
That's my memory. Any other members of the public who wish to speak? Yes, please come forward.
Good evening, John Rowe, 23 Parkland Drive. Comments on the fence. I believe it should be 8 feet off the ground to the source of the noise. I think if you do a site walk and you see where they're proposing to put the fence behind my house, which is what they've described as a 2-foot wall, is 3 feet below the grade of the construction yard. It'll become clear when you look at it. And it should really be placed at the same grade as the construction yard, which is the source of the noise. And I think if you talk to the sound attenuation people, they probably would agree with that. Furthermore, if they place it in front of the hemlocks, they're not losing any land because there's a bank that goes from the back of the hemlocks to the top of the 2-foot wall, which then goes down into the ditch or the swale. And then you have my property line. So when you walk the site, you'll see that the neighbors are not the source of the noise. The source of the noise comes from the construction lot, and I would suggest that it's 8 feet above the source. Also, I believe the bylaw states that there must be landscaping or plantings on both sides of the fence. And I don't believe the intention was to include landscaping on the abutter's property. It should be landscaping on the applicant's property. Similar to the landscaping that the applicant's home has at 24 Forest Street. So if you do the site walk, I think this will all become very, very clear. The other thing I'd like to talk about is compliance and enforcement and the seriousness of this application. The town of Milton filed a complaint in Superior Court, a contempt of court order against their nursery. It was heard at Norfolk Superior Court on July, I think, 21st, and a hearing date has been set for August 31st. I have a copy of the complaint. And what the town is alleging that their nursery continues to operate the landscaping business from 270 Hillside Street, which is against the law. And there's a cease and desist order that was issued both by the Zoning Board of Appeals here in Milton, as well as Judge Wilson. And so this is a contempt of court hearing that is taking place on the 31st of August in Norfolk Superior Court. I don't believe that this demonstrates that the applicant is serious about compliance with anything any type of special permit may have. And therefore, I believe that the board should deny the special permit, and once they comply with the existing laws, they can reapply. But I don't see how in good conscience the board can issue a special permit to a party who has snubbed their nose at not only the town of Milton, but a Norfolk Superior Court judge. And now the town of Milton is spending money, lots of legal fees, fighting, taking them to court again. So I'd like to submit the complaint as part of the public hearing.
Great.
So what has been determined, how do we get there to comply if you issue a special permit with any restriction in that permit? We've talked about enforcement. You only need enforcement if there's non-compliance. And they have demonstrated that they haven't complied, and the town's position is that they're not complying right now as we speak. So,
Thank you very much.
so you will address what this board is proposing for compliance and enforcement?
The board has not yet proposed anything for compliance
Okay.
and enforcement. Again, that comes in our deliberative process. This is, as I stated before, most special permits, if the board grants them, they run, they're done. This one has an unusual provision in that we can grant it for a shorter period of time. I would assume that the board, once having decided that, if they decide that it's a shorter period of time, whatever that time may be, the applicant would have to come back in. It would be a public hearing again to reissue the special permit. At that time, I would assume that if there has been a pattern of non-compliance, that would be presented potentially by the neighborhood, potentially by other people, potentially by the town itself, and that would go into the discussion of whether or not the special permit would be renewed.
If there's non-compliance, so what is the forum for getting compliance? Is that the ZBA?
That, again, I think we would be discussing in the deliberative process. If that's something that people are concerned about, we may wish to set something up. But I can't speak to that without having spoken to my fellow board members about how they want to set that up. So I can say that it can be part of our deliberations, because certainly the criteria has to be part of our deliberations. How that would be enforced would have to be part of our deliberations. And then the method for reporting back if there is non-compliance would be part of that as well. It all goes into that potential order of conditions.
I'm under the impression that the appeal process or for non-compliance is dictated by the bylaw itself, Mass General laws, and the town bylaws, and not this board. So my question is, can we get an opinion from the town of Milton as to what our recourse will be if you issue a special permit and if they do not comply with the conditions of that special permit?
We're straying a little bit into cross-examination at this point, but I would say, yes,
you
we
know,
will look into that.
Emily,
yes.
this has been an issue that's been going on for 30 years,
I
30 years,
understand.
long before I showed up.
Absolutely, I understand. I'll look into that and see what we can do.
Thank you.
Yep. Yes, ma'am, please come forward.
Hi, my name is Carol Stalker, and I'm a butter at 291 Hillside Street. And I've been living there for 35 years, and which was before there was any issue about their nursery, and before any of these other people were abutters. And I guess my question is, if this nursery was there all along and this farm was there all along for generations, and then people move in knowing that this business is there, what is their obligation as kind of a buyer beware with a pre-existing business? And I want to, one of the other abutters said to me there is a very
I'm going to stop you right there. We've had this before at previous things. please try and keep your comments or questions focused on your opinions or your thoughts or your concerns and not reference to other abutters.
Okay.
Whether they're pro-abutters or con-abutters or just concerned abutters, keep it to your own personal experience.
Can I read an excerpt from a letter that somebody sent me to read?
As long as it's not speaking about other abutters and it's speaking to their personal experience, that's fine.
Well, this is from Beth Neville of Five Cliff Road, Milton. She said, I know from personal experience as an apple farmer's daughter that agriculture can be loud, intrusive, and smelly. Unfortunately, Massachusetts does not have the strict laws that New Jersey has protecting agriculture from complaints of newly moved in suburban neighbors. In New Jersey, cows were there first and suburban housing built in second, and there is strong legal protection for the farm families. There were cows along the Neponset River long before there were houses on Elliott Street. Any person buying a house is obligated to look around the location before they buy to make sure they are comfortable with the neighborhood situation. They can't decide after they buy that they don't like the abutters or their business. If a homeowner...
Again, please not to the abutters. If you want to speak about, just
Well,
try
I think
and
one,
speak
I
to
think one
personal
of the
experience.
questions here is, what is the protection for pre-existing farm families when the neighborhood changes around them? Is there any? That's my question.
Okay, great. Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, please come forward, and then I'll answer. I'm going to try and group some of these questions together and answer them together. So, yes, sir.
Good evening. I'm Bob Daler, and I live at 390 Hillside Street. And I rise to support the petitioner and to support the board in hoping that you will write a special permit. Because the whole purpose of the zoning bylaw amendment that was just passed, I think really is meant to address sort of the potential nonconformities and inequities in the present operation. And one of the things I was struck by about the question of how what a question it is to split the hairs of a nursery business versus a landscaping business. And as I understand it, if contractor A came up and bought some trees, he could get mulch loaded into his truck. He could buy the trees. He could have them pick up the trees with a forklift and put it in the truck. Do all of those operations, and that's consistent with the long-standing neighborhood business of the nursery. However, if it is a Thayer nursery truck that has a landscaping job someplace else, not on the project, but remote, maybe even remote from the town, and they do all the same operations. They load the same amount of materials, they buy the same trees, except that now the forklift loads the plant materials into a Thayer truck. It's now a landscaping business and inconsistent with the zone. The bylaw amendment that was passed by the town meeting is meant to address that. It seems like it is a yeoman's duty for you to actually figure that distinction out. And I look at, I'm familiar with this kind of business and do this kind of stuff. And I think there's a whole bunch of design components which I trust the board will make good judgments about, and I think we should consider the neighbors. I live down the street, it isn't in my backyard, but the whole Thayer nursery operation is really a neighborhood asset. Yes, I don't hear the trucks back up, but it really is a neighborhood asset, and it's a neighborhood asset of a very long standing. It was there when I bought my home. I'm a customer, and I like being there. I like going there. So the idea that you wouldn't issue a special permit seems like exactly opposite from what the town meeting asked you to do. So I trust that you will do that. And I think there's a whole bunch of design considerations, the height of the fence and making sure the drainage goes away from Pam's house and those kinds of things that I think are engineering in nature, can be easily solved. And whatever the landscaping and screening, you can do that deliberation. But I would also caution you about, on the operations side of things, giving it a fair chance. The idea of, well, we'll let you do all these improvements, we'll let you do that, and you get a permit for, this is to illustrate a point in extreme, we'll give you a permit for 3 months. You know, I mean, it has to be for some reasonable duration, and I don't know what that is, but it's some number of years, not something that's short. And then, I don't recall ever in many dozens of special permits, and some of them quite complicated that I've been involved in, anyone asking for tax returns. And I would suggest strongly that this town probably doesn't want to have someone's tax returns going to the building inspector as part of a special permit. And that sort of that suggestion to me strikes as completely inappropriate. There are hours of operations, there can be starting times, there can be all kinds of things which are immediate safeguards that don't dig into the business. We're not, I don't think it's the town's business to get in their business. It's the town's business to write a special permit that protects the neighborhood. And there's a big distinction in those things. And I would just caution you on those things. But I am a supporter, and I think there are others who are supporters, and I trust that the board will do a fabulous job with the special permit.
Thank you very much. Because I'm going to recognize somebody in just 1 minute, but actually the last two speakers touched on the same point, so I want to address that quickly. There are several possible ways of looking at the business on the site. There is a current existing nursery business that is authorized by a special permit from the ZBA. We are not talking about that business except insofar as some of the operations, as the last speaker mentioned, are very similar, and we do have to distinguish between the landscaping and the nursery. Their nursery has also claimed a farm exemption on certain things, and that is not something that we are talking about. We have no jurisdiction or authority, and that is not part of our discussion. Just to make it clear to everybody, we're only talking about the business for which they have applied for a special permit under the zoning, which is the landscaping business. So to question on protection of farm families, it does not enter into the jurisdiction of the board. We are only looking at landscaping and only looking at the operations of the nursery, where they and the landscaping are very similar, and we have to distinguish between the two. I saw somebody else's hands up. Did you wish to speak? Yeah?
Sure. Hi, I'm Scott Johnson, a resident of 2 Stonehill Lane. I'm here with my wife, Dr. Keegan Johnson. We are here in support of Thayer Nursery. I want to reinforce what Bob Daler said. It is a neighborhood asset. I think it's been here for several decades, for sure a lot longer than we've been here. But we very much appreciate visiting the nursery, walking there with our children. Our children love to go and look at all of the trees, which are labeled. They learn a lot. That's essentially what I wanted to say.
Great, thank you very much. Anybody else? Yes, I saw you, and first person in the front row, and then the person in the back row. So come on forward.
Hi, I'm Bridget Waldbaum from 94 Parkwood Drive. I just want to ask you 2 questions, Ms. Ennis. One is, will you please verify for me that the board is very aware of the differences between limitations put on measurable nuisances versus limitations put on the amount of business they're able to do? For example, if they could quietly, without dust, sell twice as much loam, that would give them a chance to earn a great profit without impacting the neighbors. That the board knows the difference between limiting their chances to further their income versus not affecting the neighbors. And the second thing I wanted to say is, you guys have done an amazing job of pounding through all these different requirements and how they can be measured and how they impact the neighborhood. I encourage you to feel confident about closing the public discussion on this because you've gathered a lot of material, and we look forward to hearing your decision.
So on the first question, I think the board is aware of the limitations on nuisances versus the limitation on businesses, but the zoning does require that the business operations be limited to the 2012 levels. So we will be looking at that zoning. And on closing the public hearing, we have two outstanding issues, or two major outstanding issues that we had identified at the last one. One was the fence, and we've heard the applicant's proposal on the fence tonight. And the second is the drainage. And so once we have clarity on what is being proposed for the drainage, and assuming that no other outstanding issues have presented themselves, we would look to close the public hearing and begin our deliberations.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you can do a follow-up, but come forward so they can get you on the mic.
Would you be able to close the public hearing when we're not in this room, or would you need to come back to?
You have to come back to the public hearing in order to close the public hearing. So we would continue the public hearing to a different night. We will talk to the applicant about what night they prefer, and then we would come to that, hear whatever the last updates are, make sure there are no further questions to the board, have one last round of public comments, because presumably we will have had new information that the public would be entitled to speak to, and then we would close the public hearing. So we're just waiting for those final pieces. Anything else? Any other questions? Yes, ma'am. Oh, that's right. You're in the back. I apologize.
It's not really any question, but my name is Ellen Rogers. I live at 428 Hillside Street. I've lived there for 21 years. My family has lived in the neighborhood possibly longer than the old fields, but maybe not. So I've been visiting since a child. And I guess I would just ask the board to keep in mind that it's an overall asset. It's easy to get caught up in the minutia of fences and things like that, which are important, absolutely, and you're doing a great job sorting it all out. But I definitely support Thayer Nursery. I think that the landscaping operation should be issued a special permit and continue. That's it. Thank you.
Anything else? Anyone else? All right, in that case, we're going to bring the applicant back up. I think we had one question for you. Cheryl, you had a question about the materials in the mulch. There was a question about a public health hazard and how the mulch is created. And if you have information at this point, that'd be great. If not, you can follow up when you follow up with the additional information.
We pride ourselves on offering organic products, and we have customized our mulch to be an organic product. So it is a compost-based mulch, which actually has a lot of moisture in it. So what the mulch component does is it helps with weed suppression and moisture retention, and the compost component helps with feeding the soil, thus feeding your plants. I believe that the town might have a spec sheet on our mulch, because I know that was raised at another hearing. It might be with the ZBA. And so we did submit a letter from our supplier. So I will dig that out for you. And that's the mulch that we put in our beds. We also have 100% certified organic compost that comes from a Massachusetts farm, and it has all inputs from various comprised of leaf molds, animal manures, and food waste that are heated up to kill all weed seeds and all bacteria. So we sell that as a certified organic alternative that we use as a mulch ourselves.
Great, thank you.
Couple more comments on the mulch. There was some talk about color enhancements. No color enhancements used whatsoever. It's all organic. We don't use pallets, green wood. That's actually detrimental to the plant. We used aged wood because if you were to use pallets and other sources of green wood, you're creating an anaerobic situation in your planting bed. So the nitrogen from the ground is actually being depleted to go to the breakdown of the wood. It becomes unavailable to the plant itself. So there is no use of any of those products at all. So aged wood and compost are the two things that you guys should take away from this discussion regarding our mulch.
Okay. Thank you very much. So, continuation. Tim and Julia, I think you've been keeping track of what we have on the 27th. I think we have 333 Brush Hill, and I think we have Pleasant Street. Is that correct?
We don't have Pleasant Street yet.
don't have Pleasant
And we
Street?
might not have 333 either.
All right. So then the next question would be, and Charles has a follow-up question, which I'll recognize in a minute, but the next question would be, will you be ready with the drainage for the 27th?
I think the answer is yes. And the drainage plan will
Pretty
be
close.
ready by the first of the week and will be available for distribution.
Okay.
Thursday before is all I was.
Oh, Thursday before, yeah, for the materials, yes. So Thursday before for the materials. So we would receive that. Do we want to schedule a site walk now? Do you want to do a poll afterwards? I mean, it would be nice if we could do the site walk before the next meeting so that we're all set for the next meeting. And while people are looking at the calendar, Cheryl, did you have a question?
Yes, to Mr. Johanning's comments about the things that we have or we don't have. I just
Yep.
want to understand whether we think we do have adequate information on a couple of these.
Then now is a good time to ask those
Okay.
questions.
Because I note that we have a lighting plan,
Yep.
which has foot candle levels.
Mhm.
So I think we do have that, and has cut sheets on the light fixtures.
Yep.
So I think we do have that. The complete existing conditions plan with utilities included, is that going to be a part of the submission with, I mean, we do have an existing conditions plan, of
Right.
course. I guess the question would be, are all of the utilities included on that? And so if not, can we ask that that be confirmed? So
Yep.
I'd
Yes?
just like to be clear, we've got everything
Right.
that we think we.
There was apparently a gas line missing, I think.
There's a question as to whether there was a
There was a
gas line
gas
missing, so we just need that confirmed.
And DigSafe did come out and identified it, and you
Okay.
have the ticket number.
Okay, so,
So that will be added to the plan. Good, excellent. What else?
and then, is there anything else in terms of the materials? We just talked about the mulch, and if we could have that letter, that would be great. But any other of the materials that are in those storage bins, do we have all of that already?
Correct.
In the
Yep.
information that you've given us? Okay.
You have a list. I'm not sure if you have an exact,
The list of the types of
the list of
materials.
types.
We have a list
yeah.
of types and volumes.
Yeah, and I think in one or two cases, there were some brand names. Are you looking for, but I don't think they all had, they may not all have
I
brands.
believe we
but-
we did come up with a definition
glossary.
sheet. or-
Yes,
Okay.
that's right. You
So
have a
we'll just
glossary.
need to review that, okay. And I think your hours of operation, you've already explained, so I do think whether there were any alternative physical layouts would be before I was on this board, but my understanding is we're operating on the layout that's been submitted as the proposed
Right,
layout, right?
and assuming that it will be revised when we
Right.
get the drainage
Okay.
and the fence confirmed. Okay,
If I can just speak to the final form of plan,
yes.
I think, other than doing a drainage update, a plan that shows what's proposed for drainage, I think the board has to begin some deliberations on the specific conditions on the ground, so they get added to a plan, that gets reviewed and attached to the special permit if granted.
So once
So
we've made our
you need to
decisions,
make a
then you will
decision
revise the
based
plan to
on
show those decisions.
locations of fence, heights of fence, types of fence. It doesn't make sense for us to have DeSelle and Burke add new layers of fencing until and unless the board has determined what the fences should be, and then the plan, the final conditions plan will show those as defined. So
Yeah, I
there's-
think that's reasonable in that we have talked about a number of different changes that the applicant has said that they're willing to make, but we haven't actually formalized those in our deliberations. So if the rest of you are comfortable with, once we have decided this is where things are going, then we require the final plan, I think that sounds reasonable from my perspective. After all, we may make some changes that they hadn't actually originally proposed. So it's not fair for you to produce a plan that we then modify, seconds later effectively. So I think that's reasonable. But we may, during our deliberation phase, we may well need your engineer here as we mark up the plan to comment on that.
Understood.
So, yeah.
And,
but the drainage we will want to see so we understand it,
you
obviously.
need full drainage plan with drainage calculations,
Yep.
all of that stuff, and that's
Yes.
coming.
Okay, great. Anything else? Oh, yes, site walk. What are we thinking?
Any possibility for Tuesday the 25th at either 7 a.m. or 7 p.m.?
I could do either of those. Anybody else? Morning is actually great, come to think of it.
Tuesday the 25th.
Tuesday the 25th?
Be the 2 days before the hearing.
Yeah.
That's fine.
What
but
did you
I
say,
think I
7 in the
prefer,
morning?
I'm happy to do
7
8, by
morning.
the way, but
7
I'm trying to respect.
No, I know after, evening?
Evenings?
good?
Yeah, 7 would be fine by me in the evening. I could do either one of those.
7 in the evening would be preferable for myself.
Yeah, that's fine.
Child as well, so.
7 in the evening?
I won't be here on that day.
Okay. We can take pictures. Do you have a better day, or do you just want to go and look at the site at a different time?
I'll go look at the site.
Okay.
I can do Monday
Would
at
the
7 as well.
25th at 7 work for you guys as far as the site walk?
Fine with me.
Okay. So we'll,
24th.
so we'll post that as a meeting. For those who aren't familiar with the site walk procedure, it begins at a public meeting at the lot line. The property owner has the right to say who will or will not go onto their property. That's just how it works. And then once the board finishes doing the site walk, they come back to the lot line to close out that meeting and move forward. So let's continue this to the 27th. I'm thinking 7:50. What?
I'm going to go to your site walk. But I think Brian said the 25th. Cheryl just asked for the 24th.
Oh, I'm sorry, Cheryl, I didn't hear you.
Said would accommodate.
Oh, it's
To accommodate
24th better?
Alex, yeah, and Brian said he could do the 24th, so I just.
I can do the
I
24th,
can do the
7 o'clock at
24th
night.
or 5th.
I could do the 24th.
Is the 24th
No, I can't do the 24th. I've got a meeting, so, and I have to be there.
25th,
25th I can do.
7 o'clock.
Yeah. All right. Okay. And for this public hearing, we will continue it to, since we don't have anything else scheduled, 7:15 on the 27th.
So is it appropriate now to talk about because we had penciled in 333 Brush Hill
Yeah.
for 7:15. What's happening there is they have produced updated stormwater and drainage
Okay.
plans in response to the peer reviewers' comments.
Right.
So those are ready to go back to the peer reviewer.
Okay.
She is not ready to look at them until August 30th.
So then since we've already said 7:15, what we'll do is we'll open and continue 333 Brush Hill Road right at 7:15, and then we will open and go forward.
16.
7:16, if you have to be that precise. Does that sound reasonable to everybody? Okay. All right, so 7:16 on the 27th. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, next item on the agenda. We have several, and they aren't timed, so let's have a look at this. We have our deliberations on 865 Brush Hill Road. We have the site plan modification for 556 Adams, and we have the 135 Gun Hill Street driveway opening. I am guessing that 865 will take the longer of those discussions, so can we do 135 Gun Hill and 556 Adams?
Can I
Yeah.
make the suggestion that
Yes,
since
please.
Tom's not here and I'm going to give it for him, we put that at the end?
Okay, great, yep, that's fine.
That way we could get 556, get in and get out.
Okay.
We can get 850,
856, and then, 865 rather?
Yeah, we'll get
And
them
then-
right in.
Okay, great, and then
Because
we'll
they're gonna
we'll do the Gun Hill, and then we'll do our zoning discussion after that. Does that sound reasonable? Excellent. All right, so, 556 Adams Street.
Good evening.
Good evening, how are you?
Good to see everybody.
Exciting to be back here.
Remember to introduce yourself for the record.
Sorry, Marion. Keep my seat. I'm Mary McKetrick, and I'm here tonight representing 556 Adams Street LLC, doing business as Novara, which is the name of the new restaurant proposed for Adams Street. And the restaurant is getting ready to apply for a liquor license and is completing its final construction plans. And in the course of completing its final construction plans, 2 structures have shown up that we feel the planning board needs to look at because they weren't shown in the site plan that was approved last year. So I have sent you a letter describing generally what these are. Bob Falcone is here tonight with me. Vance Welch is here for the restaurant. Bob Falcone is the owner of the property, as you know. The restaurant, the LLC, has a lease now, and the 2 parts of the application relate to both parties because the transformer, which is the box on the back left corner of the parking lot, is the first item we're asking for approval for. That transformer box is required when you have underground wires on a property, and all of the wiring will be underground. When wires are above ground, you see the transformers on the telephone pole. But this box has to be somewhere, so the proposal is that it be located in this back left corner, which is already screened by a fence, which is going to be replaced. The fence belongs to the neighbor, and by a proposed row of screening, which was approved by the planning board last winter. This location does not take away any parking spaces. It's just behind and inside the corner of the back of where the dumpster is located on the plan. And the plan that you've received, if you received electronically and you enlarged it, you could see this very clearly, and you can see it on this. The second part of the application is for a refrigeration unit, which is a freestanding unit to be located just behind the kitchen in the back of the building. So the building commissioner is treating this as a temporary accessory structure. So as an accessory structure, it's within zoning guidelines as far as setbacks go, but it was not on your site plan. And the other aspect of the refrigeration unit that's very important, I think, to understand is that this is a refrigeration unit with a remote compressor. The compressor is going to be on the roof of the building. It's not going to be in the refrigerator on top of the refrigerator. So the unit that's going in back of the building will not emit noise, and basically what we're doing is we're adding a box to the back of the plan. So at this location, on this side of the plan, you're looking at a parking lot. At the location for the transformer, there is a neighbor in that location, but there's also a fence and screening. The larger of the 2 structures is the refrigerator unit. What the engineer has done for you in this amended site plan is to show you that it's still possible to walk behind this unit, so we're not blocking the back of the building. There was a fence required by the site plan. It's an 8-foot fence. It's going to be, I think, an 8-foot stockade fence, which is still going to be erected. And the refrigeration unit is approximately 8 feet in height, but it will be on, I think, a cement support. So it will be a little bit higher than the 8 feet.
The cooler?
Yeah, is that right, or is it on the ground?
They're only gonna get about, maybe at most 5 feet above the ground at the most.
Okay, so the height above the ground is lower than the fence then? So we sent you cut sheets so that you could actually look at what we were proposing. That was a good request that came from a planning board member. And so we're here tonight basically to answer your questions, to see if you have concerns about this, and we hope that you'll approve this as a de minimis change to the original site plan so that we can proceed, because the location of the refrigeration unit, certainly if it has to be put inside, will affect the plan for the interior, which has already been developed, but, you know, could be changed, but it would take more time.
So then the first question for the board is, do we consider this a de minimis application, or a change? If it's a de minimis change, it doesn't require a public hearing, which is why we're able to take this up without advertising. If we feel that it is not de minimis, then we have to have a public hearing, so advertise it and get comment. I assume that there's a possibility that there are members of the public who have heard about it and want to speak, and if so, I'll certainly recognize their questions. So that's the first question. And the second question is, does anybody have any questions?
I'm just curious, it says the refrigeration unit is 8 feet high.
What? 8 feet, I was what, had the same question.
Yeah.
Is that what you said?
It's sunk into the ground.
It's going to be below level.
The grade back here, the floor of this restaurant is 16 inches lower than the parking lot. That's why you'll see some stairs out there. So there's going to be, that's going to be excavated, and there'll be, the refrigerator will sit in the wall, so there's about 5 feet of that is going to be below the ground. That would equal the floor
So you're
grade.
gonna-
That's really high up there. That's a high banking. We do not propose to change the existing grade.
You're going to dig out
Yes,
grade under
31
the refrigerator
feet.
unit 5 feet.
That's correct.
So the 8 feet.
And the walk will be
8 foot
high.
fence will be a good 3 feet above the top of the refrigerator.
Absolutely, at least, yeah. Yep. And the trees. There'll be trees in there, too.
Yep, Ryan?
To the de minimis question, we did discuss, I believe, I recall discussing the transformer at the public hearing, and came to the conclusion that, I think we all sort of agreed that NSTAR wouldn't give us a location until.
Right.
That's right.
We didn't have one.
So I
Yeah.
think we knew this was a
We were
location
going
was
to-
coming. So
yeah.
from that standpoint, I would say the transformer location is de minimis. And while I have some questions about the accessory structure, it seems like it's been ruled an accessory structure, so I would argue it's probably allowed. And so I would move to say that I would move that this is a de minimis change.
Any other comments on that? We should probably
The-
make sure we're at agreement on that.
I'm just trying to be clear on something. The stairs represented on the east side of the building, those are stairs to access what?
There's a delivery door, and there's 2 doors. There were existing doors were just improving. They already were there. They were the old
So
stage
there's a doorway
entrances. So
into the
one's gonna
building.
be a delivery door for the food, and the next door is, and that's actually the utility room. It's where the electrical's coming in, the water for the sprinkler system, and the gas.
All right, maybe I misinterpreted it. It almost
You
looked-
can't see it because there's not a floor plan there, but there are 2 doors in that section right there.
I
That's
was
about
just
16 feet.
thinking it was accessing the refrigeration unit.
No.
I can see now, it's
Yeah.
clearer, that it ceases right there.
We're not changing it. That was always on the plan.
Why do you put it in red then?
And I think because we didn't have, it wasn't this deep.
Other questions?
I have another question.
Yeah.
It's not a question as much as I guess it's a comment, but I think there was a expectation or a hope that there'd be an ability to potentially connect at some point with the rear sidewalk out to the parking.
It does.
Is that, it does connect. Okay, so there is an expectation that pedestrians will be walking around the refrigerator unit potentially.
It will be there.
Only an emergency because it's gated because of the liquor laws. It's an emergency exit only.
So, okay, I guess I'm sorry, different parking lot. I was talking about the parking lot across the street.
Oh.
Falcone.
Yeah.
Right, but in order to, we don't have an answer for that right now,
No,
because in
but I
order to
guess the
access
expectation-
that way, you have to go across someone else's
So
property.
at some point, this would allow for the circulation if it needed to happen. Would we anticipate that the refrigeration unit would be aesthetically neutral enough to not be?
There's a fence around it.
Yeah, you're not even gonna
It
see
will actually have its own fence,
Yeah.
and
I see, okay,
it's
there's a
just a
fence around
box,
the
but-
actual unit.
Yes.
Yeah,
So it's up against the unit, and now I see what
Yes.
the extra line is. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
that's for security,
Understood.
but it would
Okay.
also shield the view.
Thank you.
Yes.
So is the walkway at the same level as the concrete pad for the refrigerator unit?
No, it's above it.
It's above it.
It's above it.
3 feet.
It's
It's
where it always
depressing
was.
that unit.
Just the
Right.
unit itself is being depressed.
Correct.
And how do
So
you
the
get,
other stair on the west side is going up to a terrace level then?
On the upside?
Yes.
Yes, it is.
And then the stair on the east side that Mike was asking about is going up to doors, is that right?
It goes down to doors.
Down to doors,
Yes.
okay.
yeah, it's just a question of curiosity, how do you access this unit? Is there gonna be a door directly from the building into the unit?
Yes, they're gonna cut a door inside the kitchen.
So it's gonna be
Through
like,
the wall.
all right,
It's an
so it's gonna be an extension of the building more or less, kind of.
Yeah, except that because it's not actually attached, the building
Right.
inspector has told us that it's an accessory building.
There's 2 doors.
There's 2 doors
One's a
in.
freezer, one's a cooler.
Okay.
Any other questions? Alan, any questions?
No.
All right, so, question number 1, do we feel that it's de minimis? And once we've made that, I'll see if anybody wants to speak from the public on it.
Is there any, has there been any discussion with anybody in the neighborhood relative to these changes?
Well, I don't, there is discussion quite frequently, I guess, with all the neighbors around there, although the main focus right now has been on the deconstruction of the existing residential structures.
Yeah, but it was
Um,
positive.
Yeah, I mean, there is no issue that I'm aware of. As you say, the transformer was mentioned at the previous
Right.
hearings. It's just that we didn't know where they would require that it be located. As far as the other structure goes, what I can tell you is that the issues with the neighbors to the rear have been noise and aesthetics. And they weren't too keen, as I recall, in the idea of people walking around the back of the building, to tell you the truth. But again, you can't really do that because of the liquor license laws.
Right.
So that's why when this proposal was first discussed with me, my first question was, where is the condenser for this unit? Because those mechanicals need to be up on the roof of the building if they're going to be away from neighbors, and for the noise to be away as much as possible. And I was assured that it was on the roof. But a good question was asked, which is, what does this really look like, and what are the specifications? And we did show those to you, and it is actually remotely located, that part of the unit. As far as the appearance goes, again, I think we talked about and agreed to screening and fencing that the neighbor was satisfied with, and that screening and fencing will be equally effective if if there's a box that protrudes from the back of the building as it is for the back of the building. So I don't anticipate that there would be any problem with this. And we can always, put more screening in or something like that if there is a problem. I mean, this is a relationship that both the restaurant and the owner are continuing to communicate with neighbors all the time.
All right, yes.
On the plans that were approved already, was an acoustic enclosure required around the compressors on the roof?
No.
That sometimes is required if, like Boston has a noise ordinance which requires pretty much that you have to do that in order to meet it. The location, is this, I'm looking at the back of the cut sheet where it says that it can be 55 to 50 feet. Does that mean you can go 50 feet from the unit to where the condenser is on the roof? Or do you know how remote it can be and how far away from the rear wall, once it's up to the roof, it can be?
Well, it's only 18 feet high. So once it goes up, then it can come over. I'm not sure where they're gonna put it. Vance will probably know better than that.
I don't know if we said,
Right.
do you know where each mechanical's going yet at this point?
No, I don't know.
I think, if I can, I think the point is, and correct me if wrong, I think what you're getting at is if the condenser goes directly on the roof above the unit, in fact, it's probably gonna cause more noise than if it was on the roof of the unit.
Potentially,
It's
that's.
now it's elevated, you're gonna hear it, versus being behind the fence, because it's down low on the fence.
Yeah, I mean, so if it were far enough back, you know.
Into the roof.
Into the roof, and if all of the condensers were concentrated, and then you put an enclosure, I don't wanna open up things, but at least we ought to know where on the roof it's going to go, I guess.
Again, just even if it was in the middle of the roof, like we've done before with the fences and stuff, the sound's gonna go like this, or it's gonna try to go like that, and the roof's gonna block it, where if it's on the edge, it's just gonna.
I mean, if all of the units were lined up here on the edge, that's different than if the units are in the middle, for example.
Absolutely.
The equipment. So, you know, I do think it's important to understand where the equipment is. If you're developing that now, it would be helpful to know that it should really be as close to the middle or towards the street, probably away, as far away from the residential as possible, within reason for where it's going when it gets inside, obviously.
And assuming that it's not visible from the other side from the
What
main
effect
public
does it
drive.
have on
the
the
Main Street,
Yeah, exactly.
Don't see it.
What effect does it have on the process to have this continue to another meeting and put it out there and let the public know we're gonna
Well, we,
vote on it?
excuse me.
Well, then you would be saying it's not a de minimis change,
Yes.
and you want to have a public hearing. That's,
Well, I
you
mean,
know,
that's
that's
what I'm
part of the
saying.
question, so.
What impact would that have?
Well, I guess my comment on the specific location of the condenser is that we didn't worry about all of the other condensers that are going to be on a restaurant building, and to now be worrying about this single condenser seems like we may have missed the boat on the conversation. But we can always just ask them that with this specific condenser that it be placed in the most remote location from the unit as possible.
But I think, and again, don't let me put words in it, but I think what you're getting at is it's got a spec that says the condenser can always be such a distance from the unit itself, which means you might not be able to get very far into the roof with it.
Well, that's why I'm asking for clarification, if that's what this actually says here, if that's what this is referring to. Maybe you can just confirm how far away it can be from the actual
It
unit.
appears it can be 50 feet, so that would get you somewhere around 30 feet into the building, which.
Oh, can I just add one thing?
Yeah.
We were gonna have the condensers on the roof regardless if the walk-ins were inside or outside.
Right.
So the condensers were always gonna be needed, and they were always gonna be on the roof. So it's just a question of the boxes, which are pretty benign to the rest of the.
Then we're just getting at that, we'd like to see them at least 25 feet in from the edge of the roof.
It's actually in where the present hood is now for that building.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Is that the submitted
Very well.
building plan that you're showing?
Not easy to see from this angle.
I think if we could certainly propose a comment that we'd like the condenser to be no more than 25 feet
Right,
from the edge of the building. That would
and not
potentially-
visible from Adams Street, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's about what, that little bump up, is that what you're talking about? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Was it this
that's
one?
about 25 feet, yeah.
You see it a little barely sticking up there?
Oh, yeah, yeah. that would-
Yeah.
I think without the public comment, we've got to go to a little greater length to make sure that we're.
Well, then that becomes
We're not
comes
past
back
the
to the
techniques.
question is the change that they're proposing a transformer that was already discussed during the public hearing, but not actually cited, because we couldn't get the site at the time, but was certainly discussed. Is that a de minimis? It already has gone through the public discussion, and is the addition of the refrigerated unit, which will be below the line of the fence, partially submerged into the ground, is that de minimis? The condensers were always going to be on the roof, and there is no change to the fact that the condenser that's going to be on the roof is going to an interior versus an exterior. And to Brian's point, I think we could absolutely put a comment saying that we want it further in. Yes, Alex, you have a comment.
It seems to me that the location of the refrigeration unit would be de minimis if the condenser were in the middle of the roof, and would not be de minimis if the condenser were not.
Ah, that's a good twist on it. So,
I would agree with that, only except that the condenser was always going to be there in the first place. And I would argue that we should have had this conversation in the original hearing. And at this point, we're talking about a condenser that was going to be there one way or the other. At this point, we're really talking about the location of the refrigeration unit, not the condenser.
yep, Cheryl?
Well, whereas there was no tenant plan developed at the time of the initial filing, there were no condensers located on the roof, or at least the quantity weren't identified at that time, just like the transformer, is that correct?
We always knew there was going to be a restaurant in there and that the restaurant would require certain condensers, but we did not ask for a roof plan, no.
But when you have a base building scope of work, it's different than a tenant scope of work. So now you actually have a tenant scope of work, which is adding some of the additional equipment.
But we don't-
All I'm saying is we should suggest that the condensers go to the center of the roof if possible.
but it should be-
And not just this one, but all of them. And I'm fine with that just being part of the comment, rather than saying that it needs to come back.
That building's higher.
Yeah.
Things going in there.
Yeah.
I'm fine with de minimis as long as we
Yeah.
put the requirement that all condensers are
Yeah.
a minimum of 25 feet in from the edge of the roof.
Alex?
Is that
Well, 25 feet may be too much, but they should be put in as much as they can be put in.
Yeah, those are already there and that's higher.
Okay, and
The
and you
maximum
know, I
distance,
take that, you're nodding as, that's would be
Are you-
fine by
you're-
me.
And if I can make one other comment on, with all the new energy code, all these condensers and the heating units have very high SER ratings, and they're virtually noise-free. You'll never hear them come on and off. That's
Also
all
helps
new,
now.
it's because, don't forget, this is all brand-new stuff, there's nothing going on there that's old.
Okay.
That makes a big difference.
So before we move to making any formal decisions, I just want to check and make sure, or see whether or not there are members of the public who wish to ask questions on this particular. Anybody here to speak to 556 Adams? All right, seeing none. Board members, what's your pleasure? Does anybody want to make a motion?
Again, I'd just like to make it a measure rather than the best you can do, because the best I can do is sometimes not as good as the best some other guy can do.
Yeah.
So, do we have a motion?
You want a specific number of feet?
Yeah, do you have
Yeah,
a,
20 feet.
20 feet?
25 sounded like a lot, maybe 20.
do you want to do a specific foot or do you want to do a range? 20 to 25 or?
At
20
least-
feet
at
minimum
least-
from the edge of the
At
building.
least 20 feet
Right.
from the edge of the building?
Okay, at least 20 feet from the
I
edge
don't
of
want
the
to make it
building? That
difficult, but I
sounds
just want to make it both
reasonable?
sides.
Okay.
Okay, I move that we approve these two changes as de minimis with the understanding that the condensers will be at least 20 feet from the edge of the building.
From the rear edge of the building. Just
Oh,
clarify
I
for
thought it was
edges.
all edges of
All
the
edges.
building.
Well,
Any-
I don't have the measurements in front of me to make
Well,
sure that
it's a
20 feet works.
rectangle,
Yes,
and,
okay.
It works either way, doesn't it?
If you can do that, that would be great.
Yeah, I don't think it matters at all.
All right, so we have a motion on the table. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, excellent.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so next on our list is the deliberations for 865 Brush Hill Road. So we have previously closed the public hearing on this. We have a draft special permit, site plan approval, and scenic road approval in front of us, which was all delivered to you guys in the red line version. And Ned, I'm going to open it up for you to present. Oh, sorry, I was going to open it up for Bill, yes. Sorry, I forgot, Bill. My apologies to both of you.
At the last hearing, what was left was a letter coming back from Niche Engineering.
Yes.
That letter has since come in. There was a recommendation in there that says any further stormwater management-related issues should go back to the town engineering. That being said, that is actually handled in the document that you have already been looking at. If you go to page 3, last sentence before you get to the requirements, no construction shall deviate from the substantially from the requirements without the approval of the planning board. And since everything that has already been submitted to you is defined, anything that they deviate from needs to come back here anyways.
Okay. All right, thank you. Ned?
Thank you, and thank you again for the time and diligence that the board has put into this, the review. I think we've got a well-baked plan. We have responded substantively to all comments and concerns that have been raised. I think we've done that completely and effectively. We have a fairly comprehensive draft of a permit. They seem to get longer and longer as I spend time before the board. But I would encourage the board to vote to accept the form of special permit as presented and vote to execute the permit this evening.
I just want to thank, on behalf of the board, Alex, who has been working with Ned back and forth on this long document. So Alex, thank you very much. Do you, sort of as a person who's been working on this, do you have any comments?
I've read it. Looks good to me.
Looks good to you? Okay. Yes.
I want to second my thanks. This is twice how much. I read it twice. I have one question, and it's really a clarification point. It's a minor tweak, and I just want to make sure it doesn't somehow affect the intention. In section 4I, number of bedrooms.
Page, if you have it, please.
4 of 17.
Page 4, apparently.
Just in case anybody's following along at home.
Yeah, it says there shall be no more than 93 bedrooms in the development with an average of no more than 2.6 bedrooms per unit. I question the per unit.
I had the same question.
So I guess
yeah.
that was the only thing I could find in here, and I think it meant, I understand what you're trying to say, but I'm questioning the way you're saying it.
Well, it's saying it in the way that the bylaw says it. It's an average number of units.
I understand.
The total number of units is 93. There are 3-bedroom units and there are 2-bedroom units. And the bylaw speaks to an average number of units. So the average comes out to 2.6.
Okay.
But it's not prohibiting you from doing a 3-bedroom.
Correct. That was. I just want to make sure the lawyers in the room are okay with that. I just wanted to call that one thing out.
The number of units is correct.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
Any other questions? Do we have a motion?
I move that we approve the special permit and site plan approval and scenic road permit, and sign the document reflecting that approval.
All right. Do we have a second?
Second that.
Do we have any further discussion?
I just, again, if there's necessary upgrades to the drainage system,
Yep.
we still have an avenue to make sure that happens.
Yes. My understanding from Bill is that the town engineer, those are just a few minor issues to clarify, that you'll discuss them with Nitch, with the town engineer. If there's something that needs to change, you'll come back to us. So that's your understanding as well.
If
Okay.
it's incorrect as it is, then we'd say, well, we're doing it, yeah, it's yours.
If it deviates.
Anything else?
We might want it to deviate.
Anything else? All right. Motion on the table. All those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Do you have some copies for us to sign?
Thank you.
Yep. Great.
I didn't bring blue. Do you have to do blue?
At least, as long as at
Do we
least
have
one of
the-
us are doing blue.
Okay. I can use this pen then.
Yeah. I'll switch from this to a more subdued color. All right. So for those at home who may be watching, just a little patience as we sign the documents, and then we will go on to the last two items.
We can sign the documents during
We could actually.
discussion of the last items.
Bill, do you want to bring forward, oh, you didn't hear me. Bill, do you want to bring forward 135 Gun Hill as the documents are going around?
You have, can I have a front folder, please?
Sorry.
In your packet, you have the A&R plan that was submitted with 135. In it, you have a series of pictures and a description. If you look at the roadway itself, you see the part that has the bend in it is the part that the request is to take and put a driveway within that bend. The idea is to do it between the two trees. There are two big oak trees with,
Oops.
watch out.
Forgot to disconnect. I'll be right back. Keep talking.
There's two big oak trees there with ribbons. The issue is, Gun Hill is a scenic road. Because it's a scenic road, if there was a wall, we would have to do something. The issue of the wall here, there's a rock here, a rock here, a rock here, a rock up here, here. There is no uniformity of a wall. The wall has, within this area, the roadway itself has been pushed back on both sides. I don't know if it came from the, I don't know if it was from past winters or if it's just, that's the way it's always been. Within the area where the driveway will be, there is a hickory about that big that the owner now will take and transplant to a different site. There are a bunch of chestnut sprouts, but the problem with chestnut sprouts is chestnut sprouts don't grow any bigger than 4 to 6 inches. They get 4 to 6 inches and blight hits them. There is a 6-inch dead stick in the middle of it now, and you can see on the bottom, within the first 10 inches, you see where the blight took out and wiped out the bark. We don't get chestnuts that grow any bigger than usually 2 to 4 inches, and it comes because there is an old chestnut stump down underneath there. The idea here will be that as they cut the driveway in, it will be 18 feet. They'll take the stones that are there and they will form returns on that part of the driveway. They'll do it so that they preserve the 2 oak trees, and it will only go 18 feet.
Any questions? And my apologies for stepping out. I thought I should at least
I'm
thank
not
the
sure,
people who came in front of us.
What are you telling us what he wants to do?
Yes.
And do you want us to do anything?
I would like you to claim that it is not a wall. If there is no wall, there is no need for a scenic road hearing.
We're determining the negative.
What about the removal of the trees?
The trees are on his property, they're not on the town side of the property.
Okay, so we have a picture of this.
Yep.
This construction that's not a wall.
Where is it not a wall? I don't even see anything that resembles anything.
I don't see a wall on this. Where is it? Where is it?
If you look at the plan
No,
itself,
look
it
at the
actually...
picture.
Why is it not coming?
Where in the picture is it supposed to be?
You're not
The
connected?
driveway's going to be, that tree's going to be replaced, that one
Okay,
there's
so
coming up.
if there were a wall, this would be it?
Yes,
On the top picture?
yes.
Okay.
So I have a question.
You can take the bottom one too, because the bottom one is the, that's the up close and...
So you want us to determine that the seemingly
There is no
random
wall.
collection of stones is not in fact a wall?
And I've talked to the neighbor next door, and he's like, there is no wall in that area.
If there is no wall, I can't help.
Do you see a wall in here?
No.
Okay, you see a wall in here?
No.
You see a wall here?
No,
Then there's no
you may-
wall here.
Yeah, and the radio used to say.
The
You are
town
making my
planner
fault.
has been out and determined there's no wall.
Why,
That's
why,
good enough for
No
me.
wall, then there's no scenic road application.
I gotta ask. Why is somebody coming to us, asking them to tell them that there's no wall where there's no wall?
Because if there is a wall, then the scenic road
I understand that, but there
regulations.
is no
doesn't-
wall, so why do they go in front of
They
my
just
house and
don't
say,
want
there's no wall here, so I want you to tell me there's no wall
Because
there?
look at the plan. The plan actually says remnants of
That
stone
town
wall.
says that.
So the plan's incorrect.
Well, remnants of a stone wall is not the same thing as a
And
wall.
that's the point. So
Okay.
All right.
The wall does not, the non-existent wall does not
I think we
exist.
could say the remnants of whatever stone wall there was has,
And
is
because
no
it's a
longer
scenic road, they
qualifying.
don't want to get tripped up.
I just, you made the point with the plan, it just gets fishy to me why somebody wants something to be explained that's so obvious.
Because of lawyers.
Seems like there's something going on there when you want me to tell you there's no wall.
You know,
when
you
there
have
ain't
to
no
watch
wall.
out for those lawyers.
And that's why I took pictures.
All right, so we're good? In that case, I think we can move on to our, oh, we've got 2 more things. One is the designation of the person who's going to be our liaison to the Capital Committee. I believe in Cheryl's absence, she was voted unanimously to be that person. But, so there's that, which we'll talk about in a second, so we can get that done, and then let's talk a little bit about zoning. So for that, my understanding is it's you guys saw the email, so you can correct me if it's wrong. It's one meeting a month at 7 a.m. in the morning, not every month, sometimes. Is that right, Bill?
That's correct.
Okay, so I can probably do that, at least for the next few months.
Second.
You don't want to wait a breath. All those in favor?
Aye.
Gosh, I should have asked if anybody else wanted to do that. Okay. Yeah, so we're good. You know, Brian, if you know.
I was
Too late.
I was, yeah, I'm sorry.
Too late,
I already
so.
voted.
Well, I'm also the only one who doesn't already have a liaison position, so I think that's fair. So zoning. So let me kick this off by saying the real purpose of what we were doing this summer is to establish this idea of a process to do zoning that has not come to us that we have to react to. So we've set up this idea of doing the public forums and work, of identifying zoning that we think may be something we want to explore. Using the idea of public workshops to explore that zoning, using the ability for people to comment both at the public workshops and online to get feedback on the zoning that we're testing, and then coming to a decision about, you know, as we move forward to each successive town meeting, is the zoning that we're looking at appropriate and right in timing perspective for this town meeting, or does it belong to another one? So we've already pulled a couple of things. The large lot zoning isn't going forward for October. The institutional review is not going forward to October. The first round of public comments is closed, and we've got a few of them, not as many as I was hoping, but a few of them in our packet. We have comments from various board members. I submitted mine. I see Julia, by the way, pulled together mine, Cheryl's, and Alex's on a number into a single document for us. So thank you very much, Julia. There's some others going around that have been submitted both by members of the public. I think I've got a few that I need to send to Tim for redistribution. So where we are now is we have our final public workshop is on Monday. Brian and I are going to cover it from the board. Tim and Bill will be there, and Julia, I'm hoping you can be there too. The format will be a little bit different because there will be fewer zoning articles and fewer people. We're not going to do the breakout sessions we did before. We're going to present, for those of you who can't be there, if you can get sort of a couple of sentence summary of this is what my zoning is trying to accomplish, so we can present that, and then we're going to allow people to ask questions. Along with that, the second round of public comments online will open up. That will finish towards the end of September. Now we're coming up against a couple of deadlines. Obviously, our public hearing is scheduled for September 10th. So we need to advertise that public hearing. So tonight is a good night for us to start thinking about, are there any other articles that the authors of the articles at this point want to pull? I would say that the authors of each article, the person who is shepherding each article, should by next Friday make a final decision if there is one that they feel, given all the evidence, that they would like to pull, so that we're not advertising articles that we don't feel are ready yet. Now, if after Tuesday you say, let's take signs, for example. I know signs want to go forward. Alex has given me some really thoughtful comments. Cheryl's given me some really thoughtful comments. I know a few have come in from the public. I know I've got a lot of work to do on signs, but I believe I can do that in time for our public hearing, especially with the comments that I've received. So I would keep that on. Lighting, I'm going back and forth on. I haven't made a decision at this point if I want the lighting to keep going. I'll have a look at the results that we received from the survey and from the comments. I'll have a look at what comes up on Monday night, and then make a decision by Friday if I feel that it should be pulled. Otherwise, I think anything that people feel should keep going should stay on until we get to that public hearing. Oh, that was the thing for Thayer, yeah. So I'm interested in tonight your thoughts on the zoning that you've received, the chances that you've had to look at it, your thoughts on your own articles or on other people's articles, and just sort of, you know, is there anything that we feel that we want to pull as a group want to pull now, or do we still want to leave it up to the authors who are looking through the public comment? I know you haven't had a chance to look at the surveys yet, so. Cheryl?
Yeah, just a question. If they're pulled now, are we really looking at a year from now?
No, if they're pulled now, sorry, and that's a good question. We've got two options. We can take them forward in January, put them forward in January. We will not have the luxury of putting forward drafts and then doing the reviews. It's going to have to be in final form for that first week in January, and that would go to May. And then the other option is if it's something that we think needs a lot of public work, we would take it forward to next October. So Tim and I were bouncing ideas back and forth as we were talking about the forum. And one possibility would be, get up in front of, so the format I was thinking of for town meeting is that I would give up and give the process that we've been doing so far, and then each person who's been sort of in charge of the zoning would present whichever ones of their zoning have made it through to town meeting. So, we get to share the love a little bit of our hard work and also, the credit for our various hard work. But one possibility could be that I get up and say, okay, here's the process we did over the summer. Here's what we looked at. Here's the articles that survived and are in front of you tonight. So-and-so will be doing this. So-and-so will be doing that. For the other articles, we are still interested in bringing these forward, and we're going to do a public forum starting end of January. I hope to have a date at that point. And then we'll be looking at these so that people see that there's a continuation between the work that we did over the summer and whatever we're presenting in January or next October. And if we have an idea, if we feel that an article is this close but isn't quite ready for October, then we can announce, hey, we were working on X, and we think it'd be better brought forward to May because we want some additional comments. So, there is that flexibility. I think the key has been the process. If we only go forward with one article for October or two articles or three, I'm fine with that. Personally, I think that we can certainly say that we've been working with the public on this, and this is how we're continuing, that we're learning from the process. If we have our 5 articles that are all ready to go, I'm fine with that too. So.
Another question or comment,
Yeah.
I guess. The nature of some of the comments that I received from board members, I think are legal, really out of my realm of being able to answer. Do we have adequate time for town council to review the legal questions? This is on the inclusionary zoning in particular.
Right. Yeah.
And I have to double check that there's any of that same nature on the accessory dwelling unit. But
Yeah.
so I just want to be mindful of that.
Yes,
Now,
absolutely.
Comments that come, whether it's a good idea or not, I think, and also I think there's more that I need to read that we just got and then the survey. But if it's a question of whether it's a good idea or not, I think, is that something that should be then debated on the floor of town meeting? So is that something then where the town meeting is either comfortable with some of the provisions or not? And then if not, do they send it back to the planning board for further study?
So I'll give you my personal view of that, and I would welcome everybody else's views of that. My view is if it goes in front of town meeting, we as a board have to be confident. It doesn't have to be a 5-0 vote, but the majority of the board has to be confident that if town meeting votes in favor, that we are comfortable with the implications of that zoning. So that's question number one, is we want to, and it goes without saying, but for people who are listening in, I think that's important that we clarify that. Then the second question is the 2-year rule. So if we bring it in front of town meeting, it's voted down, is it something that we're comfortable waiting another 2 years to bring back? And then there's substantially the same form and all of that, but if there is a topic that is near and dear to your heart, do you want to risk the 2-year wait on doing that? So that if town meeting votes it down. So that's sort of the other question that comes in. One of my things, and the reason I'm frankly going back and forth on lighting, is although we've had a lot of zoning come in front of us where people talk about, and the lighting will be dark sky compliant. It's certainly gone to the warrant committee. What does that mean? I think there's probably a larger public question. What does dark sky compliant mean? And, I could see waiting to get more information out to the public. Certainly in the first draft that went online, it was not just the model ordinance, but what each section of the model ordinance meant, and then I stripped that part out in order to come for a legal draft. So I think the question of whether or not the public has sufficient understanding of what these mean is a good point, especially for some of the more complex zoning. I think the deliberation about whether or not it's a good idea should take place with us first. I'm not going to pick on you, Brian, but I am a little bit, is as I was reading your 2 zoning articles, I was thinking, well, I had a different understanding of how this would go, and my different understanding has implications for what we're trying to do. So I would want to clarify with all of us that we have an understanding of each. So I was going to say, we can certainly talk about some of that tonight, but if the 27th, if we're looking at Thayer on the 27th, I would split the 27th between Thayer and a significant discussion of ones that are going forward. But if you feel, after looking at it over the weekend, that you see the comments, you see what we're getting from the public, you're looking at the amount of work you need to do to address it. If you're looking at thinking, I'm not getting as much public comment as I would like, I'm concerned about some of the feedback I'm getting and the legal implications, and you want to pull it, again, I don't have an issue with that. I think we keep talking about it because I don't think we're pulling it permanently. It's just pulling for October. To your legal point, Bill and Tim, have the articles gone to John Flynn yet for review? Okay, they should. Maybe after the weekend, they should go out as soon as possible because we will need his legal review on those. And they'll be in better format after we've had a chance to review the comments and make changes. So, and I have an email in to Ted Hayes, the chair of the warrant committee, to say, when do you need me in to talk to you about where we are in the process and what we're doing? So that's sort of where I am. I'm looking forward to your comments. And if you have thoughts on how you want to proceed or concerns about your articles, or where are you going?
Well, I have some good news.
Okay.
On amplified sound, the building inspector has said, I don't want this to be a zoning article. And I said, that's dandy with me. And he said it can be a general bylaw, though.
Okay.
And it seems to me that it's not it's basically the person calls the policeman and the policeman comes, and if they can't have a normal conversation, the policeman goes next door and tells them to turn it down. I mean, no one is going to measure ambient sound and then come, well, at least the building inspector isn't going to, unless he gets an assistant and the equipment. But establishing your ambient sound level and then figuring out, and ambient sound, of course, differs. At night, it's less, so the more noise, but you still have to establish what it is to, if you're going to do a decibel count.
So you're thinking you would move it
My thinking
out
is...
of October and we'd...
Well, no,
leave it.
I mean, either that or just say, this is not a zoning bylaw, this is suggested as a
general bylaw.
a general bylaw, and see what people say at the public hearing.
That's a good way of doing that.
So Emily?
Yes.
I just recall from the warrant committee where there was a citizens petition, and
Yep.
it was neighbors of Curry College, where they have music playing in their fields, and they have the lights on, and they rent the fields out to camps, and they have lots into sports clubs and what have you, and there's no limitations on the hours that can be running and the lights can be on, and people feel as if their complaints have gone nowhere. And so that was actually referred
Yes.
to the town to do something about. So I would hate to kind of just punt this to someone else and neighbors feel as if nobody's going to address their concerns.
So here's one of the legal questions for you. We can't actually regulate lighting for an institution, an educational institution. There was a relatively recent decision for Gordon College. So towns do not have the ability to regulate athletic field lighting for educational institutions. Now,
Do they consider a field an educational use?
Yes, as a matter of fact, that was part of this. But I do have a question that I asked John Flynn, and I need to follow up with him on because I think they were going to look into it, which is if the field is being rented to a non-educational use, say a for-profit sports camp of some sort, then is the lighting able to be regulated? Now, my other question would be, and I don't know the answer to this, I was actually talking about somebody today, is if we can't regulate lighting, can we regulate sound for an institutional use? And that is a very appropriate question to ask.
Well, our dark sky compliant lighting is not going to matter if institutions can brighten the sky up with unlimited hours and put candle
I
levels.
completely understand that, but I'm saying that because of the Dover Amendment, there are certain things that the town can't regulate now.
And
However,
the other thing is, I guess, if you say no music after 9, that may not work. It has to be music of a certain volume, that if you say no music of a certain volume after 9, and the problem, of course, is establishing what that volume is.
Well, we talk about noise with relationship to activities at a nursery as being detrimental to the one's ability to take pleasure in their home, right?
Yeah.
People came to the warrant committee and said that they have the same kind of difficulty with music activity on athletic fields and being able to take it peaceful, at their home, inside and out. So whatever, if the Dover Amendment exempts them from everything, I guess there's nothing we can do. But it sure would be good to make sure we get 100% certainty on that, so that if it does come up again, then the neighbors can be shown this is what the law is, and we can't do anything about it.
But we can direct the lights down. I mean,
we can ask them to, but we cannot force them to make that decision.
Tabor Academy has an athletic field, and they wanted to light it. And the ZBA said, no, can't do it. They have not been able to install lights on their athletic field.
That's interesting.
And so I think there's hope, Cheryl.
Bill had a statement.
Because of the article that came from Curry actually put together a plan that talks about the hours of use, some of the sound. They did go in and there is a new lighting plan, there is a new sound plan. They didn't have to do it all, but they did, because they were trying to be a good neighbor, go and implement their own policies of what to do.
When did they do this? How
Right
recent?
after that, right after that article.
Okay, because I
But there's a second
been
part
getting
to
emails
this,
from- okay,
and
yeah,
the
yeah.
second part to this is, if this is the road you really want to go down, be careful where you're going, because it doesn't just affect that one institution.
Right.
It's going to affect all of the other institutions in town that have the same issue. And when you look back at Milton Academy, Milton High School, look at back what they have and how they do their fields, it's not that one is doing all of it. There's plenty to pass around, so
Well, and that's
be
why
careful what you're asking.
I did not want to go forward with institutional review for October, because it is as I started looking into it, it is incredibly complex, and we just simply didn't have the time. For one thing, we're going to have to talk to the institutions, so we did not have the
It's
time to go
one
for that.
institution,
Yeah,
It's all, and you're grouping
exactly.
them all into the same mix.
Yeah.
And in that mix are several town institutions.
Well, and that becomes another thing. I was looking on the Mass Planners listserv, and it was saying something about towns that actually require town buildings to be subject to zoning. So, for example, when we were doing the school building project, all the schools would have come to the planning board for our site plan approval. And so some towns do that and some don't. So if you start looking at institutional review of some sort, do you include the town? And so there were a lot of questions about institutional review, which frankly I was not, sorry?
Do you then have to start looking at every road?
Well, see, and streetscapes and stuff like that. So I was not ready to bring that to October, I'm sorry. It wasn't gonna happen. So you're wanting us to ask.
I think in general, let's put it on the warrant as a general bylaw and see what the people say at the public hearing. I mean, maybe we'll get some good ideas about an enforceable standard.
Okay.
That doesn't require, I mean, the building inspector has simply said he's not going to do it, and he's also said that when it happens at night, he's not even in town.
Well, that's another question that somebody was talking to.
Whereas what I'm suggesting, if you call the policeman and the policeman you and he can't have a conversation at your door, that's prima facie evidence that the music's too loud.
And then the policeman tells them to turn it down.
And then he tells them to turn it down, and it ain't perfect, but it has elements of interest.
I do think we need to be mindful that if we're putting a requirement on, for example, the nursery there,
Yes.
a noise nuisance, are there other noise nuisance instances that we're going to need to be addressing, and are we going to address them in a comparable manner? I
Well-
guess that would be my concern.
Yeah, and originally I was thinking, although I understand why Alex would choose to start with amplified music, originally I was thinking that we would look to having a general bylaw that dealt with noise, because that question has come up before.
General noise bylaw?
A general noise bylaw, well, I thought that's where we
Like a
looked at
general
it.
lighting bylaw.
Oh,
like,
no,
well,
come on. But it's, when do contractors start work? Because
Absolutely.
some communities do regulate this and others don't. They stay away from it. And as, that was another question that I had with the lighting bylaw and with some of the language that I'd seen, and certainly true of the sign bylaw, is how much as a community do we want to regulate? Because you can get really, really, really specific, and you can stay really, really, really general. And how far down that road do we move as we look at these things? Which is why starting with amplified music wasn't a bad way at all of testing this.
It was reactive, and
Right.
reactive zoning isn't always bad zoning.
That is certainly true. So does anybody have any? Yes.
That's another question. When did you say the public hearing would be on the proposed article?
September 10th.
And is there any disadvantage to advancing the ones we have just to gauge how much public interest there is in them and then decide? Can we decide to pull some after that?
We have to decide what we're pulling and not pulling, because on
By when?
September 14th, our final language is due to the
Well,
planning board.
Actually, August 26th is the date because it has to be available when the ad goes into the newspaper.
But we can make changes based on the public hearing. That's what I'm saying.
After the public
Yes.
hearing, we can suggest a chair, but what goes into the warrant will be
The 26th?
what's there on the 26th.
No, that is what I have gotten agreement on. What's there on the 26th, or actually probably a little bit
It has to be
earlier.
what's in the warrant because that's what's being advertised.
Let me finish.
Okay.
Let me
I
finish.
mean, you may have made a
I
deal,
know, I
but
just,
don't think
yelling
so.
at me before I get a chance to speak. So because what has happened in the past is we have the public hearing, we have changes, and then there's all these green sheets floating around, and everybody has gotten upset with us because of the green sheets, even though this is how this often works. What goes into the warrant will be our final changes after the public hearing. But what we have our public hearing on is what is advertised. And I would say that what is advertised needs to be as close as possible to the final.
I think you.
Because
So another round of revisions.
You've
Yeah.
got to ask Mr. Flynn because I disagree with this legally. I don't think you have to have, what goes into the warrant has to be what you have your public hearing
But we
on.
can have the recommendation be what the changes.
They can
after the
change
public
it,
hearing.
they can
Yes,
change it.
okay.
The recommendation can be what we recommend, but what goes into the warrant originally has to be what we have the hearing
Okay,
on.
I have no
Just so
objections to
that we can
As
determine if
long
there have
as-
been material changes that weren't heard.
Yeah, as long as as long as I'm fine with the article that goes into the warrant being what was advertised and what our public hearing is on, as long as the recommendations can be our tweaks after the public hearing, so we're not showing up with green pieces of paper, I am fine with that.
Right.
I don't have
And
an
if
issue
you
with
can,
that.
and if you can convince the warrant committee, the warrant committee would have to decide that the planning board's recommended changes were what they wanted to do.
Right, exactly. Well, they may have some changes that then go in with it, but my point is we don't have green
Okay.
sheets or pink or whatever the
All right.
color's going to be this year. So no, I don't have an issue. So that means,
The 26th?
no,
No.
because it gets published on the 27th,
Oh.
which means you have to typeset everything. So I would say your final language for what you want the public hearing to be on should be submitted on the 20th. It's my guess.
Legal ads for
What month
zoning
are we on?
articles are due.
This month.
August.
We're talking a few
Okay,
days.
just confirming,
Yeah.
just
Yep.
a few
Or
days.
next 20.
Week.
The 24th of August, I have to have legal ads to the newspaper.
So when do you need it in order to set up the legal ads?
You've got it, and you can say the article will be on file at the office of the town planner, but then it has to be on file when the ad
Ad
hits
goes
the,
in.
hits the
Okay.
street. Not when the ad is put, is
Okay. When the ad hits the
contracted.
street, it's the
When it
final
hits the
the street
street and
then.
someone comes in and says, I want to see these things.
So, okay, so that's why you're saying the 26th. Okay.
Okay,
All right, so the
26th.
26th. All final language for the
language,
public hearing is due to Tim on the 26th. Which means if you have comments on other people's stuff, get them in now.
Right.
I know what I'm doing this weekend. So, but it would be helpful to know before then if you've decided that you want to pull an article. Yes,
No, the 24th. You keep saying the 26th, but it is the 24th.
24th for what?
We need the
That's the
language for the
Thursday?
ad. Yes,
That's
that's a
the
Monday.
Thursday.
That's a Monday for the Thursday, which is the 27th.
Are you, yeah, but my question is, are you putting in, you're not doing an ad with all of the language? Because if you did that, you'd have the sign
On paper.
bylaw would be the
Bankrupt the town.
paper.
They're on paper.
Yeah, you'll
You
have
need-
to,
you
no
need-
time to go bankrupt.
You need a
I didn't do it,
sufficient,
Sue had to do it.
you need a
Right, I
sufficient
need-
understanding of what
Yes.
it's going to be. So maybe when you submit your final stuff, a nice paragraph on what we're trying to do would be useful.
Yes.
Or at least enough information to Tim so he, and
Yeah.
Julie and Phil so they can write it.
Yes.
So, okay, good.
So I'm trying to go on vacation. I do want until the 26th.
Well, you've got to look at your zoning and see which ones you want to pull.
I'm going to do this in the summer vacation schedule.
Well, that's why this is, that, and again, I do want to stress this. Look, we've got next May, we've got next October. The summer was really about starting the process, finding out how it works or doesn't work. I will say that I had hoped that we would get more public comment online than we did. I knew that our participation in the meetings would be lower than we'd want because, hello, summer. But I'd hoped that we get, now we did get quite a few responses to the survey. What was the final number? Do you remember off the top of your head?
I don't remember off the top of my head, but I do remember from the survey summary that I
Uh-huh.
printed out.
Oh, better.
331 complete responses and 424.
Okay.
331 complete responses and 424 partial responses.
Okay.
Let's make sure we lean towards the microphone.
Yes.
Um,
So for the summer, that's not bad.
Right.
At all.
And I think that as a learning experience, even though it was an exceptionally long survey, 331 complete responses in the month of July is very good. So, you know, next time around, we can sort of tweak it in ways
Yeah.
that maybe we can increase that. And also, I mean, you know, we got not very many at all, like kind of long form written comments.
Mhm.
Whether that's a function of how it was publicized and how people knew about it or didn't know about it, or people's just sort of reluctance to put their ideas to paper, I don't know.
Right.
So it is a learning experience. I'll have a lot more stuff to say about if we do a postmortem.
Which I think we do. I think we're learning some important lessons about public outreach and how we structure these and all of that. So that's where we are. So if you know that you want to pull an article between now and, say, next Friday, that'd be good. Otherwise, the final language for the public hearing. And on the 27th, we will do a full discussion of what's submitted.
So one question I had before
Yeah.
we all leave is, so 333 Brush Hill,
Mhm.
we're going to open and then immediately continue.
Yep.
Do you anticipate continuing that to September 10th?
I would
Or-
prefer not to if we can, just because I think, you know, we may end up, well, it depends. If we know on
mean,
the
that's what it
27th that we have 3 articles, we can continue it to the 10th. If we know that we have 5, then we might not want to. So we might ask them, too, what they're looking for. I mean, they've been fairly relaxed about timing so far, so, but I assume at some point they'll want to get moving, so.
They're getting dangerously close to missing.
Stormwater has issues.
Yeah.
In that their stormwater report was delivered to us today.
Right.
It was mailed to the peer reviewer today, so she won't get it till tomorrow, but she's on vacation.
Right.
And she won't be back until the 30th.
So it's unlikely that we're going to have something in
We are
time for the 10th
not going to
anyway.
have it for the
Okay.
27th.
Then I think 10th we should preserve as a zoning discussion.
Or perhaps do it at the second go-round in September. I think we should just continue it to the, whatever it is, 20th
Yeah.
September.
24th?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else?
Move we adjourn.
Second? All those in favor? All right.